Hello, everyone. We're back at Awesome People Talk to Andrew for episode 3 and the one and only Andrew Scheps. Hey, Andrew.
Hi. Hi. I'm trying to get my hand in the frame. There we go. There we go.
Awesome.
How's it
How's
going?
it been since the last one? Couple weeks, 3 weeks?
Yeah, it's been good. I just went and did a Mix with the Masters seminar in the south of
Yeah.
France. So poor me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good. Really good.
Awesome. Yeah, we were talking a little bit before. You got to do some more stuff besides just mixing on this one, huh?
Yes.
So,
Yes. Got to track some drums with Pete Thomas from Elvis Costello's band, who's a fantastic drummer and a really, really nice guy.
yeah.
And his first take that was it. Done.
Crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotta love that. Very cool. Well, we have a lot of ground to cover today. We are on part 3 of this whole thing, and we've made it up to 2004-ish, somewhere in there. So pretty crazy because these
Well,
aren't exactly 30-minute episodes. So,
no. Well, before we do that, I just have
Mhm.
3 omissions from last time.
All
So
right.
I just want to catch up on that. First thing is, I cannot believe I couldn't come up with his name, but the engineer who was working on, by the way, when I first went in, who was going over to do vocals
Mhm.
with Anthony, and then also was engineering on the Linkin Park record, was Ethan Mates, obviously. Great guy, great engineer. Completely forgot his name.
Cool.
Another one whose name I wasn't sure if he wanted me to mention it, but we were talking about demixing,
Mm.
and Sam Hawking is the guy. He is the king of it. And I think that there's a lot of software out there that does good stuff on its own, but I think to do it well, it's like finding someone who's good at mixing. Like he really has to listen. He uses tons of different software within the
Mm.
same project. And yeah, he's kind of a genius.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And the only last thing was there was a question about which song I was working on the Johnny Cash thing, and it was Personal Jesus.
Oh, man. That's crazy. Very cool.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Such a good song. Do you
yeah.
have anything else to say about that one?
I think I said it all. I just couldn't remember the
Yeah.
title. So now you got to
Wow.
skip back to episode 2.
All right, we're gonna step Andrew back in the Wayback Machine.
Oh my
Welcome
God.
back, Andrew. Yeah,
Scooby
nice.
Doo.
All right, so yeah, a lot of ground to cover today. The interesting thing to me in this whole period, maybe this is only interesting to me. I'm not sure, but you worked on so many records in this time period, and some of them were you coming in just for overdubs, or you get a call to go in and finish up somebody's record, as you were saying at the end of the last episode. Somebody, projects always would go long, people had to move on, so you would have to step in and do some overdubs or do some finishing work on stuff. In that time, one thing, this is probably a personal thing to me, but I've always been kind of amazed by people who have to bounce from studio to studio to studio to studio and do like qualitative work when they're not totally sure of the room that they're going into. And you did so much of this stuff. How did you personally kind of get around any of that? I mean, were you always carrying speakers with you, or did you just go for it? I
No, I
mean,
mean for overdubbing and stuff, I wouldn't. For tracking, depending on the room, I would. I mean, if I was working at Conway, they actually had a pair of the tannoys that I used, so we just put those up.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but for overdubbing, you just show up and you know what stuff's supposed to sound like,
Hmm.
so you just deal with it. I mean,
Yeah.
it used to be even for mixing, sometimes you'd just go with what was in the room because you're only going to be there for a day, and you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, it's been so long since I've had to do it. Like now, I'd be terrified,
Mm, yeah.
because I haven't moved around. I've been mixing in my own room for 20 years or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but you just do it. If you're going to be there for a while, you set stuff up. But
Hmm.
usually, if you're coming in for a week, you don't have time to do that. You just got to get
Yeah.
to work.
Right. Do you think that that was sign of the times a little bit? I mean, this is before we all had, having a homeroom wasn't quite as common then, right?
No, it wasn't. But one of the things that was hand in hand with that was budgets were better. So, like, I could do cartage.
Yeah.
So I might, depending on what I was doing, I might have 6 racks of stuff show up.
Right.
You
Yeah. Pretty
which is
cool.
crazy. But
Yeah. Yeah. He's
yeah,
casually.
so it was, and that all kind of went away at about the time when I could do that stuff at home anyway.
Right. Yeah. Which you had quite a bit of gear. When you say cartage, I mean, was this stuff that you would spec out, or you would have your stuff brought over?
No, the cartage was me, and then if they needed to rent something, that would be separate. But the cartage, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I had, by the time we finished cartage, I think I had at least 6 26 space racks. I had all the trunks for keyboards and computers and monitors and
Yeah.
all that kind of crap, and then
Yeah.
some loot stuff. But
Well, I
yeah,
actually have a picture from, I think, around this era. I don't know if you remember the year, but I know you know the picture.
well, I can. Oh,
Let's go.
good God!
Oh, yeah.
Yes, there it is. There it is. There's
Yeah.
stories to tell about that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So 620. Well, 5 26 space racks and a 22. It looks like,
Yeah.
and then that 88 key keyboard. You can see the gigantic monitors. So it's a 17 and a 21-inch monitor, which that was a trunk. That was a huge
Mm-hmm.
trunk. Yeah, and then the Westlakes and the Tannoys. And then there was a Mackie analog 8 bus on the right, and that era is a Mackie digital 8 bus in the front next to a Mackie Huey.
Right.
And then my Sherman filter bank, which was the piece of gear we couldn't remember that was sitting on top of a plate over on the left in front of the patch bays. So,
Over. Oh, okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
And then a 3/4 inch video machine, a
Yeah.
little bit of modular stuff up top. So where's
Mm-hmm.
the modular system in this setup? I don't even know where it was because yeah, it's weird. Anyway, it's somewhere. And my Mini Moog, all the way on the
Mm-hmm.
left, the red painted red Mini Moog.
Yeah. What year was this, do you think?
Well, I don't know, but it was published right around the time I was working on the Saul Williams Amethyst Rockstar. So what year was that?
Let's see. I'll look it up here. Dave Westner in the chat says, "Oof, makes me tired just thinking about hooking all that up."
Well, every single rack was Elco's. I could rip that down and go
Ah.
somewhere in about 20 minutes and then set it back up when I got home.
Oh, very
But I had
nice.
two road cases just for cable.
Yeah. If you had to bring all this stuff somewhere, did you, call two guys in a truck or 2 men in a truck or whatever it is?
No, I had cartage. There were a couple of different guys over the years, but my favorite guy was this guy Catfish, who did cartage for a lot of different people
Yeah.
around town. Super nice guy, and he'd just show up, and we'd put the shit on his truck, and I'd go meet him, and we'd offload it and set it up. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. I'm having a hard time finding the Saul Williams thing on your all music here.
Uh, wow. I'm just looking around. It's funny seeing it because I mean it looks
Yeah.
completely familiar, but there's so many individual bits, like the two
Yeah.
distressors sitting on top with some modular stuff, and the two DAT machines. Man, you needed two DAT machines.
Yeah. Crazy. How much of this stuff was part of what you took to Mono Valley? All of it?
The
The
synths, the rack on the right before you
hmm
get to the patch bays. Oh right, no, that is 6 26 space racks because of the patch bays, and then the one smaller one. So the one next to the patch bays, that was all synths, like a lot of Roland JV things and Kurzweil stuff
Yeah.
and whatever. That went away before the gear went to Mono Valley. But like,
hmm
as I was packing up, there was a stack of stuff that I wasn't going to take.
Yeah.
But everything else pretty much went to Mono Valley, plus a lot. I mean, the stuff that went to Mono Valley is when later on when I had the rack that was just stationary
hmm
and went across the entire wall.
hmm Awesome. And you said those the bigger monitors here are Westlakes?
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
And fun fact, those are a friend of mine did. We may have talked about this home theater installations and stuff. And during one of my slow periods, I started working with him, doing low voltage stuff and whatever, and just learning things. And those speakers were, I believe, the rears in a 5.1 setup for a house he was doing for Quincy Jones.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because he had 3 of them and he needed 2 more. And I'm like, well, I'm not using them because I'm using the tannoys. So
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Uh, Aiden Cunningham asks, what was your electricity bill?
Man, electricity was cheap compared to now.
Right.
Um, yeah, I mean the air conditioner took more power and all that gear, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can see the electrical panel right in the middle of the picture. And what was
Mm-hmm.
great is that there was a ground spike in the wall. So I had my
Mm.
own ground on there. Yeah, it was super, you know, very, very clean.
Yeah. And this was at your house.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This was the garage at my house.
Very cool. Nice. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
And that's not my telly. I think that's Wendy's Telecaster.
nice.
But it is my flugelhorn, which I believe I showed you last time, and it's been cleaned up.
Ah,
So,
very nice.
yeah.
I'm trying to think about the year based off of the gear too. I was looking at the Line 6 pedal, but I think those are around in like the early 2000s. The green
Yeah, so you
delay.
can't find the Saul Williams thing. Hold on.
Yeah.
And let me open a tab here. Uh, Amethyst Rockstar.
Also, there's a TV in the middle of your speakers there that I
Yeah,
presume was not.
well, that's the video monitor for the 3/4 inch video deck.
Yeah.
So Amethyst Rockstar was released in 2001, so I would imagine that picture's from 2000.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Let's see. I'm trying to remember what magazine that was in.
Keyboard.
Keyboard magazine. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Here we go. And oh, here we go. April of 2000 is the article page.
Oh, well, there
Yeah.
you go. So they took it sometime before then.
Yeah. There you go. Nice. Okay. So at that point, though, this is 2000. You had done the Iggy Pop Avenue B record at that point, but it was kind of before some of these other big ones. You had done the Michael Jackson tours,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then the decision to build that kind of room with that much gear. That's an investment for sure. So what was some of the thinking there?
Well, I always, wanted to own the means of production. Like I think I mentioned this last time. I never felt good asking friends to like spend money on a studio so we could go do
Right.
stuff. So, it started off with just Mackie 1604s and a couple D88s and all that.
Yeah.
A lot of the synths happened during the Michael Jackson record because we had so
Hmm.
many rooms going that we needed synth rigs everywhere. So I bought a bunch of stuff then.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it just grew. You'd find stuff because it was pre-internet,
Right.
basically for gear. So a
Right.
lot of the stuff was sold locally, and later on, studios were closing. But
Hmm.
until I think that setup, it was mostly just bought. And like you can see there's a huge in the rack that had at the bottom of the rack with the DAT machines on the left. There's
Hmm.
a gigantic compressor at the bottom, and like that's because I tried to buy a second BA6A because I had one that was
Ah.
amazing,
Hmm.
and I tried to buy a second one, and it sounded like crap compared to the one I had.
Mm.
And so I called the guy and said, "Look, this sounds terrible. I want to bring it back." He's like, "Well, I can't give you your money back." I'm like, really? He said, "Well, I'll give you a bunch of other compressors." And so I got that and a bunch of other stuff, and they were all terrible. But
Yeah.
that gate at the bottom was actually kind of fun.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
So many good pieces in there. Very cool. And the 888s
Yeah,
in the rack
five eight
next to
eight
that.
eight.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, and then right below that is two of the Sony 800s, which was their version of the D88, and then two D88s right below that.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, this stuff, it would go with you on gigs, and then you'd have people over to do overdubs when you didn't want to ask them to spend money. So that was
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
that.
and
Yeah.
at that time, that's when I was doing a lot of work with Wendy and Lisa doing the
Yeah.
scoring.
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. Well, yeah, glad we got the picture. All right. So where we kind of left off last time was right around 2004, 2005. And there's a couple really cool credits in here that I'm wondering how they came about. So starting with 2004, you had a yellow sea creature stop by your house by the name of SpongeBob SquarePants.
I
Which
did, and
happens to
his
be
friend
above your
Patrick.
head. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how did this come about?
Um, I don't know exactly why I ended up doing it. I mean, it's a recommendation. Andy Paley was the producer, and he had a Beach Boys connection and did that kind of production, just tracks and tracks and tracks. And so it was two songs for the SpongeBob movie.
Hmm.
Um, I don't remember what they were called, but well, yeah, I got him down off the modular last time, so I must have already told the story. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know exactly how it happened.
Yeah. You talked about him coming by, but we didn't talk about like what, like how did this,
Well, I mean, I think
work?
I mentioned that that was when my kids finally thought I was cool.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the best
Yeah.
part was that they did, and I'm assuming the kids still have them. They recorded stuff for each of the kids, and then they did one for Wendy and Lisa because Wendy was the one who introduced me to SpongeBob SquarePants. She showed up one day and she said, "Oh my God, have you seen SpongeBob SquarePants? Like, I've absolutely no idea what you're talking about." And I had this rectangular piece of foam, and
Hmm.
she got a Sharpie and started drawing on it. And that was SpongeBob, and it sat next to her while she played.
Nice.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Well, on, sort of on the heels of that, you also did some work on the Rent soundtrack. So what was that
Yep.
about?
Well, that was, just another sort of not random thing, but so Rob Cavallo was producing that, and I'd done a
Hmm.
bunch of records doing Pro Tools editing and all kinds of stuff for him.
Hmm.
And he had an engineer who he worked with most of the time at that point, and he was set up. I'm not going to remember the name of the studio, but he was set up in this SSL room in a studio that he was at all the time. And he was going to record keyboards on that soundtrack, and Jamie Mahobrek was going to play, one of my favorite keyboard players in the world. And like, yeah, of course I'll come over and record those. And then it just turned into, oh, by the way, let's mix this because we really should deliver it tomorrow. And it was already late, and so that took until, I don't know, 2:30 or 3 in the morning or something like that. So just mix that
Yeah.
one track, and that was it, just done. Like, okay,
Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
yeah,
I
real quick
love
one
the,
day session. Yeah,
right. It's just that, kind of already said this, but that period and that, the way that you were being hired on records is fascinating to me. Just, that it would be like these things where you just go in and you do like some guitar overdubs or something like that on one record, and then, as opposed to the like you're in the record for 2 months kind of life cycle, which obviously you've done a ton of as well, but there's just so many in
yeah.
here that are, yeah,
I was just good at slotting in, I guess,
yeah,
because I could come in and just sort of take over and read the room and, kind of figure
yeah,
stuff out as we went.
yeah,
Yeah, I did do quite a bit of that. Or like with the Rob Cavallo thing, you show up to do one thing and it just turns into something else.
yeah, yeah. I also, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I that seems like a very special skill and one that should be highlighted to be able to step into a record like that. Because if you're called in to, say, track guitars for the Limp Bizkit thing, like you were mentioning, and then the next day you're working on a Alanis Morissette record, right? Like those are extraordinarily different records, and to be able to step in and read the intention of the record that's going on, and be able to kind of match in with that and like with the producer and everything, that seems like a very, to me it seems like a unique skill to be able to do that and hop onto a record so quickly. I mean, am I overthinking
Yeah,
that,
I
or
mean,
is it
well, you said correct you if you're wrong, so you're wrong. No.
okay?
No, no. I think absolutely, but I think actually a bigger part of being successful at that is reading the people. Like the
Hmm.
intention, as soon as you hit play, you kind of get, what they're doing, and you're recording one thing, so you're just making it work with what's there. But it's
Yeah.
being able to walk in and immediately kind of get what your gig is, because the gig could be one of a million things,
Hmm.
and just work with the people,
Yeah.
especially if you've never worked with them before and you're in a new room and all that kind of stuff. To, on the inside, who knew what the hell was going on, but on the outside, calm, competent, just like, yep, let's get to work. I'll figure it out. And,
Yeah.
but I did
Yeah.
have a couple of weird gigs where stuff just went horribly wrong. Like I worked on the soundtrack for, oh God, I'm not going to remember the name or the guy who was doing the music. Really cool guy doing the music for it. But anyway, I walked in and sat down. And I was taking over to finish something. and I sat down at the computer and the hard drive crashed. And like everything was gone. And
Right.
look, it's nothing to do with me, but I had literally just sat down. David
Right.
Holmes. David Holmes was the guy doing the music. I won't remember the movie, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
that
Wow.
wasn't good.
Yeah. I feel like I've had situations like that too, and you're just like, well, this is over.
Yeah,
I'll
but it
just see
wasn't. I
myself
worked
out.
on it for a few weeks, and yeah, it was
Nice.
fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So going on sort of the same track here, we have Sings the Peggy Lee Songbook with Bette Midler. You're an engineer on this one.
Yeah. So that record was the first time that Barry Manilow had produced Bette Midler in like decades. I think they might have had a falling out. And so I was recording it. We were recording orchestra at O. Henry before it went private. Beautiful sounding live room and API desk, and you know, and I don't record like the old school loads of reverb way. So I was recording and I thought it sounded really good. But I remember Nelson Riddle saying, "The hell is going on? Where's the reverb?" Like, shit, he's Nelson Riddle. I gotta. And there were a bunch of different arrangers, so it was just so much stuff going on.
Yeah.
But yeah. So I tracked all the orchestra for that.
Wow.
And some of Bette's vocals I kind of helped set up, and then David Benson took over and recorded the vocals.
Cool. Yeah. So let's talk about orchestra for a second, because I don't think there's a whole lot of you talking about miking up orchestras. Well, what were some things that you did?
I just called people and said, "What the hell do I do?"
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what I did.
Right.
So, the typical stuff, I try and get the sound LCR, but then I didn't do spot mics on individual players usually, but just section mics, so a few feet above for 4 players, that kind of thing. Really standard stuff. And I did a couple of orchestra dates up in Seattle, because back in the day they were non-union, and you'd be on projects that absolutely could not afford to record orchestras in LA. And it was a shame, because obviously the players are great and you wanted to do it, but you'd sneak up to Seattle and do it basically.
Right.
And so a few of those, and yeah, I think one of them, for a film, they just used the LCR. Like we had so we were recording for 3 days, I think. And we had the second half of the third day booked to mix what we'd recorded. And we got to the end of the recording at like noon on the third day. And we were listening back. It's like, well, why are we going to mix this? We haven't been listening to the spot mics or the section mics for like the whole time. Just LCR. It sounds great. So let's take half a day off. And one of the best afternoons ever of like get out of school day, just down the street was a Cinerama Dome, huge, so 70 millimeter, and they had just re-released 2001.
Man.
I went and watched that in gigantic Cinerama Dome with the sound just pristine. And if you haven't watched that movie carefully, one of the best things about it is how much of it is completely silent. Because when they're out in space, there's nothing.
Yeah.
Unless they cut to them and then you get some breathing and then you're outside. Like watching the one who got his air thing cut and he's just floating off into space, completely silent. So that was great. So I had half a day and I went to a movie.
Nice. Not Star Wars style sound in space.
No.
Yeah.
Pew, pew.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. How did they make that sound? Okay. So skipping forward here, in 2005 you also worked on Alanis Morissette. It's called The Collection. You're a Pro Tools operator, apparently, according to AllMusic. Or is this just like a collection of records from previous stuff?
Yeah, I think it was previous stuff.
Just
did we talk about, I think we talked about
Alanis on other stuff.
Yeah. So that must have just been something from
like
there.
A collection thing. Yeah. Hence The Collection. Well, in probably another one as well, The Essential Michael Jackson, 2005, you're listed as executive producer.
Yeah,
on the song.
Welcome to AllMusic, my friend.
You were the executive.
Yeah, I certainly did not get paid as an executive producer on that. Yeah, not an executive. It would have been like one of the 40 credits from the history sessions,
Yeah,
that then
just
ended up on
included
Blood
in
on the
there.
Dance Floor as well. And yeah, it was
Right,
just something
right.
best of.
Which is listed for 2006, Blood on the Dance Floor and Invisible. And on this one, we've got engineers and clavier, programming, drum programming, sound effects, soundscape, synthesizer programming. You were busy.
Yeah, so that would have been a song from the history sessions that didn't get finished and ended up on that record. So
Cool.
yeah, I'd already put in several months on whatever it was.
Yeah. Yeah. Were you involved with it in 2006 or
No,
around that
no,
time?
no,
It was
no,
just
no.
hashing it back from
Once,
the catalog.
yeah, after the history record, that was kind of, well, no, I did all of the stuff for the HBO show that wasn't. There
Yeah.
was an HBO show they were rehearsing for, and that was the last stuff I did for Michael, I think.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Uh, well, that brings us to the credit listing for Donnie California from the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yes, sir.
This one,
So we haven't talked about this record at all, have we? I don't
no,
remember. No.
no. I think like there have been brief mentions of it,
Right.
but we haven't actually gone into it. And um, up until we started doing Puremix stuff together and everything, that was kind of where my knowledge of your career started. That's just me, obviously. There
Well,
was
you need
plenty
to go
before
back
that.
and watch parts 1 and 2 then, pal.
Right, exactly. Before we did those.
Oh, right.
No, and before I met you too. I mean, that was when, to me, you kind of became a household name. That again, that's like completely just my perception of things. But that was when I became like really aware of your work and
Yeah, I
stuff.
mean, I
And
think 99
yeah,
Problems was sort of a big
hmm
deal, but it was just one track, and a lot of people didn't know, who mixed what. And yeah,
yeah,
but Stadium Arcadium probably, in terms of a mixed credit, yeah, I'm sure
yeah,
that was a thing.
yeah. It's a big moment in your career. So,
Yeah. So you want to talk about that record?
no, I want to go on to the next one.
Yeah, let's just
The
do
next
that.
one is, I'm just kidding. So, yes, I want to talk about that record.
Okay, so that record was tracked by Mark Lynette, who'd done a lot of stuff with the Beach Boys, et cetera, et cetera. I
Mm,
don't know exactly, how he got chosen, but it was being tracked at the Laurel Canyon House, so the Blood Sugar Sex Magic House,
mm,
and he was doing the basic tracks. They were doing them all to tape, and then Ryan Hewitt came in and sort of took over doing that.
mm-hmm,
And then I got a call from Rick's project coordinator, Lindsay, and I was actually at John Paterno's house when I got the call.
mm,
Or maybe I got the call right before I went. I just remember talking to John about it. And she said, "Hey, so can you come track some vocals with Anthony on this Chili Peppers thing? It'll probably be like 3 weeks." I'm like, okay. And I mean, it was months.
yeah.
38 songs.
Wow.
And he did
Yeah.
them all. So we set up upstairs um, at the house,
Mm-hmm.
and I just set him up with some headphones and did the usual, like, see, having just done this Mix of the Masters seminar, I feel
Yep.
like I'm repeating myself, even though I'm not. So when we set up, it was one of those things like, okay, let's do a mic shootout. And we put up everything. We had a
Mm-hmm.
U47, we had a U67, we had a 251. I mean, every single really expensive mic you can possibly have ever. And then an SM7 at the end, because that's what he'd used before. And he was really cool about it. We sang one verse of a song, went down the row, like, oh, that's nice. Ooh, 251, oh, C12. Like, those are great. He got on the SM7, like, yep, that's Chili Peppers record. Send them all back.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so we just did lead vocals. So he would sing all day, and then I would comp the next morning and have a comp together. And I got to say, I mean, he's a great singer. A lot of people like to say he isn't, but he is, and it's
Yeah.
ridiculous to say he isn't.
Yeah.
And he's a fantastic frontman too. Like, it's
Ridiculous.
kind of
Yeah.
insane. So
Yeah.
comping was really more about sort of intention, and I'd
Mm-hmm.
just go for, like when we talked about the Audio Slave record. Everything was good. It was just
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, this is great. But the most fun part was taking all of his crazy little ad libs and trying to get as many of them into the vocal comp as possible. And there's like, that was all just while we're doing takes.
Yeah.
and probably 90% of them are on the record because he's just funny all the
Yeah.
time.
Nice.
Yeah, so did that, and then there was a mix shootout for mixing the record.
Yeah.
And as always, I came in second. Or, well, always came in second, or I'd come in first, but I wouldn't do the record. Like, it didn't matter what happened, but I wouldn't end up doing the record.
Yeah.
And strangely, they thought my mixes were Jim Scott because they did it blind. Fair enough.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know why. Because Jim Scott's, first of all, he's done a bunch of Chili Peppers records, and he's an insanely great mixer. But
Yeah.
anyway, but they thought there was something about Ryan's mixes that was just something different that they didn't
Sure.
have. So Ryan set up to mix, and I mean, there were just so many songs, and mixing off tape, everything took longer.
Mhm.
So at one point, a couple of months in, they just said, look, we have to get this done faster. So let's get Andrew to start mixing. And Ryan was mixing at Andorra on an Eve, and they wanted the album mixed on an Eve. Like that
Mhm.
was just a thing. And the only other Neve in town that would have been good for mixing was at what's the name of the studio? NRG.
Mm.
Not the curved one for the tracking room, but there was an 8068 in there at the time. And
Mhm.
it was sort of the beginning of the time where people were tracking on it, but no one was mixing on it. And if you're not mixing on it, you don't like stress out every single part of the board. And there are like a
Right.
bunch of sends that hadn't been used in years and whatever. So I spent the first sort of week like just getting everything working and then sending mixes over. And I don't know, it just never was right. And so I said, well, Ocean Way rents a console because we'd used it to
Hmm.
track. I think they'd used half of it to track. And I said, let me just rent that and put it at my room at home. I've got a bunch of outboard gear. We'll rent a few things. And so we did that. We had 2 tape machines. And that's one of the things that Debbie loved the most was her job in the morning was to go turn on the Studers so they could warm up. She loved it.
Nice.
So yeah, and I started mixing and it went really well there. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was awesome. And the best part was that to get the console in, because I was still set up to do mix the other way. So the way you saw the studio in that picture, that's the way it was set up. But on
Uh-huh.
the right, where that Mackie Analog 8 bus was, that's where the Neve went. And it was a 72 input Neve. So it's like 14 feet long.
Yeah.
And there was a couch that I had to just stand up against the wall. So it's
Yeah.
basically 2 studios worth of shit. You had to step over all the cables that went to the patch bays. But it was great. And most of it, I would send mixes out and, get comments. But John wanted to come in and just mess with his overdubs on almost every mix. So I'd have half a day with John on every song,
Yeah.
which was
Wow.
fun.
Right.
I think he was
Yeah.
the only one who came over, but yeah, he came over a lot for that. And
Yeah.
sometimes you worry because like a lot of people are really into like making their studios sort of look expensive and things. And I'm just the opposite. Just like I don't want
Yeah.
people to spend money going to a studio. I don't feel like, it's like, well, I just have some gear and like, just work at home. I'm not going to spend money making it look like anything.
Yeah.
But it had a vibe. There was just something about that room that everybody who showed up liked, even when it was a total fucking mess because there was so much stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it
It
was
was
great.
just
And
about the
Jason
work,
Goss- Sorry, what's that?
It was just about the work. It wasn't about like,
Yeah, but it
any of the
just
other
felt
stuff.
good in there. It was always
Yeah.
good. And then Jason Gossman was assisting me on that. For those who don't know him, just a fantastic engineer, really, really funny. I mean,
Mhm.
we had some laughs on that. Definitely. We, at one point, it was either on that record or it was on the Metallica record. I can't remember. But at one point, he actually was sitting at his, no, I think it was because we didn't really have laptops at that point, I don't think. So he was sitting at one of the computers and he used to just giggle to himself. Like he'd do something he thought was funny, but he wouldn't bother telling anybody. And so at one point, he set up an email address and started sending me fan emails about the Chili Peppers. It was the Chili Peppers. And it was coming from like RHCP Superfan 97. And it was about how I was this person's favorite mixer, except for Joseph Jack Poogie. And like it was, and you could just see him giggling. And as soon as I got the first one, I'm like, Jason, come on, man. But it was, yeah, really, really funny. And then the Danny California thing was just Ryan had mixed it. I mean, that song, if there's an interview where they talk about this, they decided before they even started the record that that was the first single, period.
Mm.
And they just had this idea. I think it was John and Chad together that they were going to do a drum groove that was like early Wu-Tang. So that boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom, like that is Wu-Tang.
Yeah.
So they were going to do that, and they were going to do a song, and then they wrote the song, and it was still going to be the first single. And the chorus lyric on that song was never sung like that. There were like 3 versions of the chorus that we sang, including background vocals, and then they finally said, "Oh, here's what the lyric should be." And I had to comp it from stuff, and I seem to remember there was one thing where the way the lyrics were done, I had to fly an S in to like make a transition happen. Like it was super tweaky to get it to work. But Ryan had mixed it, and then for whatever reason, it was like, well, I don't know, let's have Andrew try mix. And so I tried to mix, and yeah. So I mean, it's not like there was anything wrong with Ryan's, but there's something just vibe wise that was different.
Yeah. Yeah. That's insane. Okay. So lots of stories inside of that. RHCP Superfan is in the chat and he wants to know why you haven't answered his email yet.
You tell that guy to fuck right off.
Yeah. He's been waiting for 20 some years for you to answer that email. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So, okay. There's a lot to dissect there. So let's talk about the mix off thing. Is this something that you had to do a lot?
Rick was really into it. Yeah. I mean, because, his whole thing is whatever's best for the record, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's not worried about hurting people's feelings or whatever. So at that point, there were a lot of mix-offs. So I did test mixes for Dixie Chicks. I did test mixes for, a bunch of records.
Yeah.
And that was one of them. And I think one of the songs I did really, really well at. And then another one, they're like, oh, I think we like Ryan's better. So when I started mixing, they were like, well, okay, we like Ryan's thing on the heavier song. So Ryan will keep going on the rock stuff and Andrew will do the quiet stuff. And then we kind of ran out of quiet stuff. And like, well, what do we do?
Yeah.
So I did a loud one. Like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then it was like, then it didn't matter which songs.
Yeah.
But
yeah, you guys are just kind of tag teaming at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
and the thing about the mix-offs, though, is you would, I couldn't do those test mixes at home. Like, there's no way. I didn't own a Neve at that point, So I went to a studio and got spec time, I think, at Bay 7, which was in the Valley at that point. And it was the only time I've ever been able to go back and pay them full rate for the spec time. And I didn't ask anyone else to do it. I just showed up and wrote them a check and said, I ended up getting the gig eventually. Here's the money. Thank you so much for letting me do it. Like, this is the first time anyone has ever done that.
That's super cool.
Because everybody just took advantage of everything.
Yeah.
And, but I would never have even been able to try it otherwise.
Right. Wow. That's awesome that you did that. I was kind of hoping that the rental, because I don't think we've talked about how you acquired your Neves yet. I don't think I know that story. So I was kind of hoping that the rental story was going to turn into like Debbie popping in from off camera and be like, he told me he was just renting it.
No, it's the opposite. It's the opposite. So it was there for, it had to be 3 or 4 months. And then it went away. And Debbie and I were both really sad. Like, we loved having it there. Because they're great. It's like the best piece of furniture you've ever seen. They're warm. They smell good.
Right.
It was really, really fun to have it. And I was starting to mix more, obviously, because it was a bit of a turning point in terms of that. And I just thought, well, I don't like paying money for a studio if I can do it at home because I feel weird spending people's money again. Yeah. So let me see if I can find one. And I looked around, and then Ocean Way was selling a console for Scott Litt. So an 8068. And I went and looked at it, and it needed a little bit of work, but it was in pretty good shape. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I got a home equity loan, took all
Hmm.
the money out of the house. Like, okay, I'll do this. And they said, oh, you know what? He doesn't want to sell. I'd finally gotten up the
Right.
nerve to say, like, okay, I will do this, which seemed like a really bad idea at the time.
Yeah.
But we're like, okay, just do this, build it, and they will come, whatever.
Yeah.
And then I mean, it must have been 6 weeks later because I'd been looking at other consoles and were terrible. Couldn't find one. And then they called up and said, okay, so Scott needs money for something. So you can buy it, but you also have to buy his BCM 10. Like, okay, so how much is that going to
Right.
cost? And, it was way more money than I wanted to spend. I mean, well,
Yeah.
anything is more money than you ever want to spend. But it was really expensive. And we just like, okay, just do it. So we emptied
Yeah.
out the house. There's practically no equity left in it,
Yeah.
and bought the console, and then just
Yeah.
paid that thing off as fast as we possibly could. So that's when I had the 32 input 8068, no automation. Then they were taking a console out, or maybe it was closing at Signet Sound, which was the original LA Motown studio, but then they'd switched over. They were doing post. But they had a Neve VR upstairs that had flying faders. And Bill Johnston is someone I went to college with, and he was the chief tech there at the time. And he said, well, we're going to sell our flying fader system. And the faders were almost the same size as what would go into an 8068. So I bought the system with a bunch of extra cards, which it turns out was a really good idea.
Mhm.
And then I got Mike Wamscans, who had been the tech at Oceanway when I bought the console, and he was great about coming over and helping me mod it and get it all put in and stuff. And so he put me in touch with, and man, I'm not going to remember his name now. There's one of the guys who basically invented flying faders. Super, super smart guy. And he lived out like past Ojai. And I just dropped the system off, and there was something about the mute circuit. Like on an 8068, you used the mute, but the board was a different shape than it was for the VR. And he literally took the circuit boards out, put them on a table saw, a chop saw, and just boink, 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 and then soldered some stuff on there. And then they work perfectly.
Right.
So I put fine faders on that. And then I think it was for the Metallica record, right? I was looking at Debbie. So for the Metallica record, 32 inputs was not going to cut it. But before we even get to that, so that enabled me to do mixes I never would have done. Like I mixed a Cass McCombs record.
Hmm.
And, that was not a big budget, but it was great. It was
Yeah.
really great to be able to do it. And he came over and we had a lot of fun. That's, I vocoded the vocal on one song and then ended up giving him a vocoder because like, well, that's cool. How am I going to do that? Like, all right, here's a vocoder. Because I
That's
did it with my
awesome.
modulator.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
So anyway, we'll skip ahead just to the Metallica record. So then the 8068 that I had rented for the Chili Peppers, they'd sent the 32 input 8068 with the full monitor section down to a studio in St. Bart's that they
Hmm.
built. No, the 8088, sorry. So that's a 32. No, it's a 40 input is the 8088. So the 40 input went down to St. Bart's where it promptly started rusting, but they had it in it was like $10,000 a night to stay in this beachfront thing with a
Yeah.
studio. So what it meant is they had their 32 input expansion console. So it's an 8068, but there was no monitor section. Like you couldn't really use it on its own.
Hmm.
It had a mix bus, but the mix bus went nowhere. Like it was just sort of sitting there. So I called him up and said, look, I want to buy that because it's useless to you. You have no console you can hook it up to. And Alan Sides was like, oh, yeah, maybe you can't really do anything about it. And then he's like, I mean, he collected gear. I think he just like, well, why? I don't want to sell anything ever. Like, no, I'm going to
Right.
keep that. And then I kept calling him out like, dude, you said you were going to sell it. I got an email. It says you're going to sell it. I think that's a contract. It's like, no, I'm not going to sell it. No, forget it. And then I think his wife said, dude, sell it. Like that's got to go.
Right.
So I bought that. And then with Mike Wamscans, We spent forever getting that together. But the flying faders system, that board already had flying faders. So all I had to do was put the cards in, hook up the flat cables, done. And I had a 64 input system with flying
Wow.
faders. And then I put flying faders on the BCM10, so I had 10 extra inputs for that. So
Amazing.
I had a
Holy cow.
74 input console, all with flying faders.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Yeah. And you did a lot of the work yourself?
Well, I mean,
I mean, you
with
did
Mike,
like
but
the
there were
card
things
thing and
like,
yeah.
yeah, he showed me how to do stuff. So I recapped, well, I put in all new relays by myself, and then I
Hmm.
started recapping the EQs, and it was a little tweaking. I didn't want to mess anything up. So he and I did that. I think I probably did a third of it, and he did 2/3.
Hmm.
Maybe I did even less than that. But then at one point, I dipped the console. I just talked to a bunch of people. So you take everything out, and then you dip it in a basically a jewelry cleaner tank. But you've got to
Yeah.
get the solution right because it depends what metals are on there. Unfortunately, the Neve stuff is old enough. It's not alloys. Like, it's just the metal. And so it could stand up to anything. But I think it took, I did both consoles, and I think all told, it probably took 2 months because you just
Wow.
take all the modules out, take the daughter boards out, clean all those connectors while the stuff is like sitting in this tank. Then you
Hmm.
need to empty out the tank and just put distilled water in, dip them again. Then you got to hose them off, like literally hose them off. And because we lived in LA, they were just drying in stacks in the driveway.
Yeah.
Then, because you've cleaned out all of the lubricant, every single switch in the pot, you had to go through and lubricate
And
every single switch and every single pot, then put the stuff together and then put it back in. And yeah, that took forever. But they were pristine by the time I
yeah.
was done. And then the expansion I bought, it had replacement knobs. It had the knobs that they put on the Scheps reissue
Hmm.
EQs, and it just didn't look right. And there was a guy that made knobs, and so I bought 1,500 knobs and spent a week or 2 weeks putting those on the desk. So
Oh my gosh.
when it got to Mono Valley and we finally put the whole desk together, because mine was in an L, it was like a 90
Yeah.
degree thing,
Yeah.
it was just spectacular.
Wow.
Like, holy shit. I mean, a
Wow.
12-foot long Neve that just looked new. I
Yeah.
replaced all the light bulbs with these like really warm sort of amber LED lights. We put in meter buffer circuits because the way the Neves are wired, the meter is just hanging off the fader. So the audio just gets split. And part of it goes to the amplifier that then goes out of the channel. But part of it is just on these really long wires that go up to the meters. And so we
Wow.
put
Yeah.
buffers in so that,
Right.
decoupled
There's
the
no,
meter from the
yeah.
fader.
Yeah.
And
That's
then I
interesting. That's
drove it.
interesting about that design. I'm surprised about that.
I mean, it
That is,
worked.
yeah.
There was nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it. But then also, so inside, there are little amplifier daughter boards that are used in 4 different places. And some of it is in the monitor path, and some of it is just for the sends, and, 4 different places in the channel. Some of them were Class A, and some of them were chips. And so I reconfigured the whole board so I knew where the Class A was and I knew where the chips were.
Mm.
And of course, probably everyone watching this, like, oh man, the Class A must have been amazing. That stuff with the chips. The reason the ones with the chips existed is because the BBC bought 8068s back in the day, and they tested everything, like hardcore, before
Mm.
anyone was ever allowed to use it. And they called up Neve and they said, these boards are ridiculous. The temperature variation is insane. Everything about them is wrong. Every single one of them sounds different and they're noisy. We will not buy this console. And so they said, how about we build some with chips? And they got those daughter boards and said, these sound fantastic. There's no noise. They're exactly the same once the
Mm.
console warms up. We will buy this console.
Right.
So in a way, they're
Oh,
actually
wow.
better, but they're not
Yeah.
Class A. So people think Class A is magic. So
Right. Right.
yeah, I love those consoles. I spent so much time getting them right.
Yeah. That's incredible. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like your consoles are becoming a legend on the internet, like in the history of recording stuff. Like those
Well,
consoles are.
what was really funny is, well, they got sold. That was not funny,
Yeah.
but it
Right.
had to happen. We'll get to that
Yeah.
at some
Yeah.
point. And a friend of mine, Matt Rossbang, who was
Hmm.
on last week, I think, or the
Yeah.
week before,
Yeah.
Matt said, "Dude, I just saw your consoles." Like, what? He said, "Yeah, there was a bunch of gear and two 8068s at Dave Hill, who modifies 8068s." He said, "Yeah, it was at his place." And I said, "Like, is that Andrew's stuff?" Like, "Yeah, I think so." Like,
That's crazy. Yeah.
ah.
Right,
So
right. Yeah.
so yeah, they're
We need to
still
put an
floating
AirTag
around.
on those things or something just to be able to
Yeah,
see where
this
that
is
see what it is.
pre-AirTag, and somehow I don't
Right.
think that would help.
It probably wouldn't be legal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, the good thing is what that means is they're being taken care of. They're
Yeah.
so it's all fine because that's
Yeah.
why I didn't keep them because they would have gone into storage.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's probably good to hear that they were at like a good tech place and all that, and
Yeah.
not just rotting in a basement or something. So, did we wrap it up on the Chili Pepper stuff? Do you feel? I mean, because
Well,
I was wondering if well, let's see. We went from Chili Peppers. You opened up the door on Metallica, and then we landed on the Neve console. I think that's
yeah.
the
I
recap.
mean, obviously mixing half of that record was
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
Because it's a really great record. I'm a huge Chili Peppers fan, and I like almost all the
Hmm.
records. I mean, Uplift Mofo Party Plan might be one of my favorites, and that
Yeah.
just means I'm really old. But that came out while I was in college, and that's when I also saw them playing a little club in Miami Beach, and like that was a big deal for me.
Yeah.
And Behind the Sun is one of my favorite Chili Peppers songs ever,
Yeah.
and that has Skinny Sweaty Man in a Green Suit. So anyway, that's a great record. But
Yeah.
Stadium Arcadium is great.
Yeah.
It's a great record. There are so many good songs on there. So mixing that was awesome. And one of my favorite kind of moments, because it was probably the tail end of when this would happen, because people were still listening to the radio a lot. I was driving on Ventura Boulevard and at a traffic light, and this red convertible pulls up next to me, and the top is down, and Danny California is blaring, and there's this woman singing along and having the time of her life singing that. And I
Yeah.
wanted to roll down the window and like, I mixed that, it was like, but it was such a great moment,
Yeah.
actually seeing the stuff go out into the wild and make people
Right.
happy.
Right. I mean, that's a huge thing, right? Like whenever you, not me, I haven't had this, but like if you're out in the world and you see something like that, I mean, it's like seeing the ultimate goal of everything that you're doing with the art, right? Like
Yeah.
you're like, there it is.
Yeah.
That's
I
it.
mean,
You
so
know?
the ultimate name drop version of that is I mean, we'll talk about this when we get to it, but I went to London to work on the U2 stuff with Rick, which we'll get to.
Yeah, we will.
And in the cab on the way in from the airport, I heard Danny California, and then there was something else that I had done. And
Yeah.
like, that's insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane.
Yeah. Yeah. Across the world and you're hearing the stuff. That's amazing. Okay, so a couple questions. One from the chat room here. It says, sorry, where is it? Okay, so Got Your asks, how is payment structured when you're doing it that way? Competition for a final mix. Did you usually find that they would pay your mix rate anyway, or were these things spec, or like how did they usually go?
So, most of them were, I would do the mixes for free, but they would have to come up with something to pay for the studio.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And later on, I got to the point where I had won like 3 or 4 mix shootouts in a row and not done any of the records. And
Yeah.
at that point, I said, I have to get paid something to do the mixes. And that actually got me out. I didn't do mix shootouts because they didn't want to pay anything.
Yeah.
So that happened more and more. But I'd also seen a lot of mixed shootouts. Like Rich Costi was one of the first people I knew who just said, absolutely not. I'm not doing a mixed shootout. And
Mm-hmm.
he'd get the gig
Yeah.
because he was, unobtainium. Therefore,
Right.
you know,
Right.
because
Yeah.
the problem with a mixed shootout is like, I suppose the good thing is you get someone's first take on your stuff, but nobody's first take with no context is going to be a final mix. Whereas in their head, for Rich Costi, he's an unbelievably great mixer and they know what it will end up being. So they've got this sort of unfinished mix where no one's told you anything about it to
Mm-hmm.
compare to their version in their head of what Rich Costi would do with it. why the hell would you not hire Rich Costi? Of course you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and Rich is just the example, but it just became obvious that you sort of had to take part because otherwise you wouldn't be considered most of the time. And I'm not Rich Costi. So I felt like on some of them, yeah, okay, I'll take part, but I tried to get paid something.
Right.
It didn't matter. Like one of the things for me for my entire career is that the number doesn't matter if I feel it's fair.
Mm-hmm.
I almost don't care what I'm getting paid as long as for the situation it's like, okay, that's fair.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Kind of. It's actually really stupid. I probably left a lot
Well,
of
you're a
money.
terrible businessman, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Right. But it makes a lot of sense. No, I'm kidding. That's how do you feel about the financial part of that? Like personal, I mean, feelings. I don't know. I mean, was that just kind of the way that? I mean, maybe it's still this way, but I don't do mix shootouts, so I don't know. Like, do you feel that doing those things on spec is a good thing, like for mixers? I
Well,
mean,
here's what I say in seminars and things like that. And I think you have to get paid something
mm-hmm,
because if you do something for free, it's literally worthless. They
mm-hmm,
have nothing invested in it. So they don't even really care. They just check it out. And unless it is absolutely spectacular and something they were never expecting, you're never going to get the gig. You're the person who does
mm,
stuff for free.
yep, yeah,
It's the definition of the word worthless. It's worth absolutely nothing.
yeah,
So why would they pay attention? Whereas if you say, yeah, I'll do a couple of mixes for you, but it's going to cost you some money, even if it's cheap,
yeah,
they are literally invested in what they're going to get, and they listen
right,
to it differently.
right, yeah, and it's disrespectful of the person's time, but yeah,
Yeah, but
yeah,
that's never stopped people. You
right,
know,
yeah,
My manager has a great way of putting it, Frank McDonough. He just says, look, we're plumbers. When the toilet is spewing feces all over the bathroom, you are the most important person in the world. As
right,
soon as it's fixed, good luck getting them to answer the phone.
right, yeah, right, right. You're done, right? You can leave the house now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Chat room, we are definitely going to get to Lincoln Park, Minutes at Midnight. Hang in there with us. I'm just kind of reading some of these comments
Well, that
here.
was right after Stadium Arcadium.
Uh, okay, I have one more question about Stadium Arcadium.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And this, maybe it's a terrible question, but listening to that record in preparation for this and before too, I was thinking about the challenge of mixing some of the songs on that record because the production is so it's just so minimalistic. And I'm wondering, was that a challenge for you when you were doing it, or were you just like, this is just what the Chili Peppers sound like, and it's doesn't have to
I
fill a
mean,
bunch
it
of
is what
space?
they sound like. So, I mean, I had a
Yeah,
reference in my head for a decade of
yeah,
like what the Chili Peppers sounded like. So, no, but I mean, if you think about the verses in Danny California, there's absolutely nothing going on.
right, yeah,
And that was tough. But then at the same time, there were songs that were just crazy, like Snow. Let's talk about Snow for a second.
yeah,
So remember, we're mixing off of 2-inch tape and we're printing 2 half-inch tape. Their Pro Tools was dragging like some very last overdubs or out of tracks, so like percussion and whatever. But basically, tape to tape, all analog. There's no editing that you can do in the computer. So at the end of Snow, the way it was tracked, there was a double chorus, but there was also a guitar solo that came in. I think it was the second half of the chorus, something like that. And
mhm,
then as I'm mixing, they're like, yeah, this is sounding really good, but having the solo over the vocal is just not happening. Like, okay, great. So I'll just get the vocals out of the way. Like, no, 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 no. We need the double chorus and then we need the solo. Like, okay, I can't edit the tape because there's time code on it to lock the two
mm,
tape machines together. So, and I'm not going to like do 2-inch edits and bounce it to new tapes because again, the overdubs, like there's no way you will keep it in sync once you've got a second reel of tape. There are ways to do it, but yeah, you
yeah,
don't want to do that. So I had to have 2 sets of automation going on the console, and Flying Faders was a good thing to do that because it does a mix tree. So I could just back up and then I would have a different mix tree that was for that. Then I had automation that would do the mutes there. Then I had different Pro Tools stuff that had to be open for the different sections of the song. So I would mix to the end of the double chorus with the solo muted and all the vocals on, let it go an extra 2 bars. Then I'd rewind the tapes, switch all the automation, switch all the shit in Pro Tools, switch everything, print the end of the first half of the chorus with special mutes to get rid of the vocals the way they would come out underneath the solo, and then print that to the end of the song, and then have to do an edit just to be able to listen to the mix. Every single version.
Oh my God.
Then, because we're doing this to half inch, you can't, and on a console, you can't go back and recall the mix. So I was printing probably 12 to 15 versions of every song, because we would do like a version with John's guitar overdubs up in case we needed that. But then, of course, you have to combine that with every vocal level you're printing. So you're immediately like 6 versions just for that. And I had to edit every single one as I'm printing.
Gosh.
Then talking about the tape editing. So we're getting ready to send stuff to mastering. And I got a call from John saying, look, I think it was in like the pre-choruses of Danny California, I want the guitar overdubs up because there was some extra stuff going on, but you do have vocals. And like, okay, cool. So we'll do that. So I have all the half-inch reels, and I'm on my own at this point. And the half-inch machine is, I can remember, like all the way in the back of the room next to the wall, and I've got a table next to me. And so I'm chopping things, and I've got, 4 reels of half-inch going, and I'm cutting it onto another reel of half-inch. And like an idiot, I answered the phone in the middle of it.
Oh no.
What the fuck are you thinking? Never, ever take a phone call while you're editing half-inch, because stuff is everywhere and you have to keep track of it. And sometimes you're like rolling part that you need tails out onto a heads out reel, like backwards, and you flip the reel over to remember, and you put post-it notes on things and whatever. And so I get off the phone, and it was actually with Lindsay, so it was a call about the record or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is probably why I answered it.
Right.
So then I go back to finish putting the song together, and I'd lost the bridge.
Oh my God.
I couldn't find the fucking bridge. I mean, where is the confounded bridge, as the song says?
Yeah.
And it took me, it was probably 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. I was getting tape out of the trash can because, you're cutting lots of tape off the reel to go, and just holding it and rubbing it against the heads to see what was on.
Oh my gosh.
And then it was on a reel, but I'd wrapped another thing around it. So it was like the second thing in on a reel of tape. And of course I knew that because I'm really good at keeping track of stuff while I'm doing it.
Yeah.
So that,
but it's like RAM, you would reset or whatever, and it was cleared out. Yeah.
Exactly. Someone restarted me, and it was all gone. So, yeah.
Oh my gosh. So have you talked to your therapist about this, and did they figure out that this is the reason you made Bounce Factory? So.
It's one of the reasons.
Right.
One of the reasons.
Yeah.
And mastering that record took a really long time. So Vlado Meller was mastering, and his assistant was Mark Santangelo, who now cuts vinyl at a different mastering place.
Yeah.
Great engineer.
To
really
pause that, Mark's on Puremix, and he gave one of the coolest on camera explanations of a lathe and each piece of it working and everything. So Puremix people, go check that out. It's awesome. Mastering with Dave Koch. It's part of a start to finish series. You'll find it on there, but yeah, Mark's amazing.
I should know that. But so Mark is awesome. So Vlado had already mastered, but we were doing tiny little tweaks, and there was a label deadline, and I was up all night, 2 nights in a row with Mark because he had to send me CD disc images, and I had really slow DSL, as did everybody at the time.
Yeah.
So it would take like probably an hour to download. Then I'd have to burn a disc, and I think maybe there was an 8
That's
times burner at
yeah,
that point.
yeah.
And then I'd have to listen and like, oh man, no, that transition we gotta do like, and this was the thing about working with Rick. If you showed you could do something, you just do it. So I
Hmm.
was the one signing off on the CDs. I was the one cutting the takes together for thing. I
Yeah,
checked all of the vinyl for Rick for years because I had a turntable and I would be meticulous about it. And
yeah.
so, yeah, Mark and I were up for days finishing that thing. And we finished, I think, probably 4 or 5 in the morning the day it had to be delivered.
Amazing. Yeah.
So, yeah, start to finish on that thing.
Wow. Wow. That's crazy.
I don't even
Uh,
remember what question you
Glad
had.
that story came out. No, we were just,
Yeah.
I mean, we were basically finishing up talking about chili peppers, and yeah, I feel like we almost missed that story. So that's
Yeah,
super crazy. That's crazy. Sounds incredibly painful, and you're never going to get that time back. So cheers.
yeah, that's true.
Okay. Um, no, that's really, really cool. I mean, what an experience. Like you must, there has to be a piece of you that looks back at that with, like as much of a nightmare as like the bridge thing might have been at the time or cutting all of the tape together and stuff. Like it's a pretty cool experience in the background now that you don't have to do it anymore.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was amazing while I was doing it, but at the same time, it's what you're doing. And
Yeah.
it's like if you get starstruck about it,
Yep.
that means it's too big for you. So you
Hmm.
can't be like that. You have to just own it like this.
Yeah.
And I'm terrible at that anyway. But you have to just say, like, this is going to go well. Because if
Yeah.
you think too much about it, you spiral.
Yeah.
So, when they said, okay, you're going to start mixing, and I was at the other studio and it wasn't going well, I just like, look, this is not happening. I
Mm.
can't keep doing this. I will rent a console. I mean, and, I'd never done anything like that. And I'm just telling them, this is the only way I'm going to be able to mix the record is to rent a Neve and put it in my garage.
Yeah.
What?
Right.
That's insane.
Yeah.
But I just figured I have to do it that way because I know I've mixed stuff in my room and I know I can make it work
Yeah.
somehow.
You're touching on something important that I want to expand on for a second. Like the fact that you had the confidence to say those things, and the thing that you were saying before about if you did the spec mix for free, they don't really value it. I mean, yes, that's a pretty ridiculous thing, or at least a large scale thing to be like, I need to rent a Neve and I need to put it in my house if you want me to mix this record. But if you
It's
say it with conviction, they're going to be like, he's going to mix the hell out of that record. You know?
Well, I mean, look, and you're working on a record. It doesn't have an unlimited budget, but it
Right.
kind of does. Like it was like, okay, cool. If that's going to get it done, then that's what we'll do.
Right.
And it wasn't, I wasn't brought on because Ryan was having trouble. It's
Yeah.
just the songs
The
are really
scale.
complicated, and getting everybody to sign off on stuff just took a long time.
Yeah.
And they kind of did the math and like, well, we'd like to finish it sooner than that.
Yeah.
So it just had to work, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Did you and Ryan communicate much during the record?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially at the beginning, I went over and kind of had to look at what he was doing because, his mixes sounded great and I wanted to make sure I had an idea of what he was doing. And then we talked a lot while we were mixing because it's on tape. So, you can't just scour through things. You need help. And the track sheets were meticulous and all that.
Hmm.
But like he was doing stuff. Dana Nielsen was working with him on those, on his mixes. And there was a lot of session prep. I wanted to know, like, what are you doing with this? And then, we'd commiserate on stuff because there's always something.
Yeah.
Yeah, we talk quite a bit.
Cool. Yeah. That reminds me of, you talk about in several videos, like how you love being able to work on a full record because you'll find something out on song 7 and you'll be like, oh, well, let me just go and apply that to the other songs. Was it
Yeah.
kind of like that where you guys would find little things that would work and you'd share tips and stuff? Or
It wasn't even that. No, it was
Mhm.
more, well, I mean, there were a few things, I guess, like that. Like we had safetied everything to Pro Tools.
Mhm.
So I had a Pro Tools session running that didn't have any audio coming out of it, but just so I could see where the toms were. So I
Hmm.
could go through and do a passive automation, bringing the tom tracks up naturally to do
That's
that.
brilliant.
And,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I'd had my visual on it because otherwise the mixes would have taken me forever. And like,
Yeah.
you'd have stuff sharing tracks. So I would need to mult it out on the console and do mute automation to bring stuff up on different channels. And I mean, John's guitar overdubs, there were like the little section right at the end of the first verse of
Mm-hmm.
Danny California. It's, I don't know how, it's like little bendy things. And I think it's 7 tracks or something like that, make that up.
Wow.
And finding all of them, like there was one missing for like 2 or 3 mixer visions. And like, oh, that's there. So it was stuff like that. Even though everything was documented really, really well, it was just getting strategies to be able to just mix,
Yeah.
because otherwise you'd spend your life figuring stuff out, and then you're
Yeah.
tired and you lose a whole day, and
Yeah. Yeah. Crazy. Okay. My last thing for the Chili Peppers, because you had been a fan
well,
of them
we've
before.
there are other records. We'll get to the
Yeah.
other Chili Pepper records. So
All right. Great. Um, this was your first though with them, right? Or was
well,
there?
no, it was the first one
There
mixing.
was
I did the
overdubs.
overdubs with John on By the Way, which we talked about last time.
Yes.
That's when I couldn't
Yeah.
remember Ethan's name because I'm an idiot.
So at this point, you had worked. I mean, I'm kind of going back to the first time that you worked with the Chili Peppers, but at this point, you'd worked with like just multiple. I mean, really superstars, like lots of big names and everything. And so I don't know, like how much of Starstruck was still a thing for you, or if it was. That's part of the question, though. But like Chili Peppers being a band that you liked way before working with them, what was that like going into that? Were you just like, oh, just another gig, or
No, I
I
mean,
mean,
none
yeah.
of them were just another gig, but at the same time, when you walk in the room, I think one of the reasons that I got along well with pretty much everybody I worked with
Hmm.
was that I just treated them like normal people.
Yeah.
And some of these people, like they're used to that and some are not. But it's like,
Right.
look, we're here to record vocals. We're here to
Yeah.
track music. And they're amazing. And a
Hmm.
lot of them have like a presence, there's something about them. But
Hmm.
at the same time, you're there to do the same thing that you do, and you're there because supposedly you're on the level
Hmm.
with them to be able to do it. So
Yeah.
just walking in and being a normal person, but also being really, really good at reading, like who you could joke with, who you could, all that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. Um, so I kind of made it like it was just another gig, but you certainly didn't feel that way. I mean,
Sure.
on the way to the studio, I'd be freaking out,
Yeah.
you know,
Or just excited. Yeah. Right.
excited or having a panic attack.
Right.
That happened a few times. Literally
Right.
pull over to the side of the road and think I could call in sick, or I can just drive to the studio and see what happens, you know. But
Yeah.
yeah, either way. I mean, obviously you don't lose the excitement of it, because if you do that, then you just need to find something else to do.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Do you still have moments of that then?
Oh yeah.
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 Um,
Amazing.
yeah, it's definitely. I mean, another band that I love forever that I got to work with is Motorpsycho, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, I mean, it's hard work and there can be stuff about projects you don't like, but if you don't get excited about the music, then you can't do a good job. So
Yeah.
once you
Yeah.
knuckle down and just work, there's always something about that that's great.
Right.
Well, not always, most of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not sure if we went on a tangent with my question about like the challenge of mixing a sparse Chili Peppers record. Oh yeah, I think we went on to Snow. Was there anything else
Yeah.
about that? Like that was, anything you recall about that helped you make it work? And I don't know if that's technique or what if you even thought
I
about
think
it.
it's just getting out of the way of it. I mean, they're
Hmm.
all such individual sounding players. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously John's tones go all over the place, but he's got that clean Chili Peppers tone that he took over from Hillel with. I mean,
Hmm.
Hillel like did that. There were other bands doing it. It's not like he invented it. But John came into that band super young because he knew every single song and can play them all.
Yeah.
And so he had studied Hillel's playing, and he then, I mean, obviously just took it into all the places he's taken it. So his stuff could sound wildly different, but it was the Chili Peppers. It was like Anthony
Hmm.
on the SM7. there's an obvious thing that is the Chili Peppers, so you just make it sound like the Chili Peppers, and you do that
Mhm.
by getting out of the way because they are the Chili Peppers. So
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's not like it mixes itself. It was still a lot of work, but it was just about making it as chili peppery as you could make it in a way,
Yeah.
or something like
Awesome.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. With some of it, it just seems like the temptation would be there to do the wrong reverb or too much, you know? But that's definitely not how that record sounds to me. It's like, it's exactly what you said, where it sounds like you just let what the band was doing happen. And that was one of the most amazing things about those mixes to me is like, I feel like it would take guts to let it be as bare as it was, or that is part of the skill, knowing that that's what it had to be, you know?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they track with intention, and
Yeah.
there are rough mixes, and it's like, the songs all had a history of being like that, and it's why they were like that. I
Yeah.
wasn't about to get my trumpet out and like, let me fill this up, put some harmonium on there, and
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
it
Only
wasn't
on
that
your
kind
spec
of record.
mix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I sang all
Okay.
over that shit.
Right. Nice.
Did some pipe tracks for Anthony.
Yeah. Yep.
Go AK.
That's
Yeah, I
awesome.
didn't. I didn't do that.
Um, well, not that anybody knows of anyway.
No.
Yeah. Hasn't been released. Okay. Future Sex Love Sounds. Am I and all music going in the right order, or should we be moving on to Metallica?
Well, I mean, in
Or sorry,
terms of
Minutes to Midnight.
work, like recording stuff, Linkin Park was right after the Chili Peppers.
Yeah.
Um, the I'm trying to remember when the you might want to say the artist because my mind is going nuts for future.
Oh, Justin Timberlake.
Yeah, Justin
Yeah.
Timberlake. That one, it was sort of a one-off where um, they were tracking it at Neil Diamond's studio. He had a studio on the kind of West Hollywood area. It was very, very cool. And Jason later was doing the basic tracks, and I went down to see him while they were doing it. And James Gadsden was playing drums, which was just insane. Like the whole
Yeah.
band was insane.
Yeah.
And the craziest part was the drum kit shows up, James's drum kit, and like the tom heads are just cratered. Like they've been on there for so long. And he said, like, maybe I should put some new heads on here. Like, no, what are
Yeah.
you talking about? And so they did the first take, and we went back and had a listen, and we're just soloing stuff up to see, like, the sounds are okay or whatever. And we had the drums soloed, and the we get to where there's a drum fill, and it was like it sounded like he was falling down the stairs. Like it was so like, what the hell is going on? Like, hold on a second, take it out of solo, roll back, hit play, and it was the best drum fill ever. But on
Wow.
its own, it was the worst drum fill ever.
Ever.
Like it was crazy how seemingly out of time and weird it was. But man, in the track, it
Mm.
was just incredible. Absolutely incredible. So it was only that one song and I mixed it. Um, yeah, I mean that was it. I mixed that. So
And you did tracking on it too?
no, I didn't. I just went by while Jason was tracking.
Ah, cool.
Because Rick would do that where if you had been doing a lot of tracking for him and someone was going to start tracking something, say, hey, why don't you just come down and like, okay. But I
Yeah.
guess it was just in case something was going on. But Jason's a
Sure.
great engineer. So,
Yeah.
there was no
Yeah.
problem with that. So I just hung out for an hour or so and then I split. But
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Do you remember the name of the song? I should
it's the
have that
last
in front
song
of
on
me.
the record. It's the
Okay.
last song. Pull up a track list and I'll tell you you're right. How's that?
Okay. And this is the one with the falling down the stairs drum sound or drum fill?
Yeah, it's in there somewhere. I mean, you'll never know because it just sounds like James Gadsden being
Yeah.
amazing.
Right.
You know.
Uh it is in parentheses another song all over
Yep.
again. Cool.
Yep, that's it.
Awesome. Got to go listen to that. Cool. All right. Let's go on to Lincoln Park. The chat's been asking for it for a while. So,
All right.
I
Yeah, I worked on that. Next.
Sweet. All right,
This
let's talk
was Mike
about.
in the chat.
All right, Jewel. Sorry.
Yeah. So, yeah, that record, I mean, as we were finishing up um, Stadium Arcadium, Rick said, "You want to do Linkin Park?" Actually, it was one of the funnier moments Xanthi's ever had. You may remember Xanthi from episode 1,
Yeah,
my very
as seen
cheeky
on
daughter,
popular shows such as
where
yeah.
he called. I think this was the time he said this. Uh, he'd called her, or I think he emailed and said, "Hey, man, I got a project for you," or something like that. And Xanthi said, "What was it?" She said, like a history report and a poster for science. Like, high school project
Right.
stuff. But it was Lincoln Park because they were going to track at the same house right after. And it was funny. I mean, obviously Rick had talked to those guys, and they're pretty amazing.
Hmm.
Mike and Brad, like they're all really amazing. And Chester, fucking insanely good singer.
Yeah.
And so we get up there, and I think they'd already been working on stuff as they do. They had a lot of stuff already going.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'd listen with Rick and like, okay, let's do this and that and whatever. And then there were a couple of songs where it's like, I don't know about this version of the song. Why don't we track that again? And so he said, we'll set up and track as a band. And they kind of looked at him like, what? Like, yeah, we'll track as a band. Like, what?
Why?
Like,
Yeah.
that's just not at all how they make records. And it was
Yeah.
really alien to them. They're like, that's ridiculous. Why would we do that? We'll have Rob come in and play drums, and we'll do some stuff with those drums, and then we'll build up a track. Or I will have already built up a track, and Rob will come in and play drums to that. Like,
Yeah.
so, we tried a little bit of that, and it was like, well, it's not how they make records. So, I mean, we used some stuff from that, but it just wasn't the way they wanted to do it. So then we made records the way they make records. And for a little while, they would not want people just sort of hanging around in the control room while they were working on stuff. So
Mm-hmm.
I'd just be sitting out in the dining room, sort of waiting for there to be something to be. And that was one of those, like, oh, you come into the studio and, you assess what's going on.
Mm.
Like I'd come in there and go, okay, we're ready to do a thing. And like, okay, but what are we working on? Like I had absolutely no idea what was going on sometimes.
Yeah.
And you just get up to speed in about 5 seconds and set up to record
Yeah.
whatever you were going to record. And we also, on that record for Brad, we rented a bunch of amps from Joe Barresi, and they were amazing.
Oh my gosh. I bet.
Like ridiculous amps.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of fun. We set up one of the PCP amp switchers, and we just had them all mic'd up, and like, ooh, let's use this combination on that. And
Do you remember
really,
any of
really
those
cool.
amps?
I mean, it was modified everything,
Right.
know,
Breezy
but
specials. Yeah.
but in a really, really good way. I mean, I could probably rack my brain and come up with something, but like there was one
Yeah.
with the Watkins tape echo built in, one of those ones with kind of the angled front, which I'm not going to remember stuff. But
Wait, what? The amp had a Watkins built in to it?
yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah.
cool.
There was a whole generation of amps that had those built in.
I had no idea. Wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, just a bunch of stuff, and it was great. And
Yeah.
I remember at one point Mike was in the control room, and for some reason he'd pulled in like the funky drummer loop. He's
Yeah.
like, "Man, this feels so good. It's nowhere near the grid. Like, what the, And then we like moved on to something else. It was just really funny. And like, we
Right.
wanted to look at it and just see like what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, I remember
Which,
in that time too, they were I don't know that they were like that this happened a lot or if it's just my memory, but I just remember seeing a lot of advertisements for Pro Tools with them involved with it. Like there was I don't know why I'm
I mean,
remembering that, but
it wasn't super early days with Pro Tools, but it was,
yeah.
yeah, they were absolutely early, huge adopters and used
Yeah.
it for everything. Like, and they did. It wasn't like they were in there working on something else. Like they were
Yeah.
all over Pro Tools.
Yeah.
So,
I remember
and
they were kind of like
really,
poster boys.
really, really good and really creative with it. And,
Right.
the stuff that they had done before, they had done, I believe, with Ethan Mates.
Hmm.
And so that's how Ethan ended up coming back on the record, because it's one of those things where you work on the record for a while and then, okay, now Rick Rubin's going to work on the record. Well, Rick has engineers and Ethan's like, okay. And, so I'm really
Hmm.
glad that he got back on the record and did quite a bit of engineering and, helped
Yeah.
finish it up too.
Yeah. Amazing. So for the sessions with Rick, did they end up doing the live band thing in the?
No, we tried it. I think it was 2 or 3 songs, and they kept some stuff from it, but it just, it's not the way they put stuff together at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And they would do a lot of stuff where it's like, okay, Chester, they'd give him the track and he'd work up some lyrics and he would sing, but the song wasn't done, and then he'd sing again like a few weeks later, and
Hmm.
so it would all just come together. I think they'd sort of get inspired by what they were doing at the time to then
Hmm.
move on to the next level of the song, and they might only keep a section of a song and then would turn into something else. And some songs would go from being like more organic rock things into more experimental things and then back again. Or they would
Yeah.
just try everything.
Yeah. Awesome. But it was a lot of writing during the recording process for them
Yeah,
too,
but
right?
I think it's like you couldn't tease those two things apart.
Mm,
They're the same.
right. Yeah. Which is a unique, thing about them and how that record was made. That's really cool. The so what you were just doing tracking on this?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Nice. And then how many songs? Do you remember?
Uh, well, I worked on the whole record,
Yeah.
because we were working on a batch of songs. I didn't finish the record because I had to do another gig. I don't even remember what it was.
Hmm.
But in the middle of the record, that's when the U2 thing happened. And so I think that was when Ethan managed to actually like get back in and do quite a bit of engineering on it, which is great because he had such a good rapport with the band and he really knew what they wanted, whereas there was a little more of me trying to catch up. And I think that the stuff that I added was getting those amps in, like the
Yeah.
stuff you being used to sort of making Rick records. It was like, okay, this is going to be amazing for this record. And Brad loved having those amps there and it really inspired him, I think.
Yeah.
So like I managed to get all that stuff in place. And then Ethan came in and had the rapport with them in a way that, I'm not going to get in a month.
Yeah.
And so then he started doing a lot of the tracking and hanging out with them. And I don't remember, I came back and I worked on it for quite a while, but I don't remember really the time frames of when I split and when I got back.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, cool. Let's see. So Joe, sorry, I'm being distracted by the chat. Joe in the chat says, seeing how the conversation's going, I think we're going to need a part 4. Not that I'm complaining, rather the opposite, but I think the low row part needs to be an extra episode.
Well, see, we talked about this before we went live, and I'm like, well,
Yeah.
we should get to Low Roar because people have actually asked about it, which I think is insane because
Yeah.
from where I am, it's like still no one's heard of them. But we could save it. It's early.
Yeah. Oh, we can. I'm not saying that we stop now, but
No, but when we
I
get to
really
Low
like the
Roar,
idea of like making a moment out of Low Roar.
yeah,
So,
well, because when we get to it, we're not going to talk about the stuff in between. We're going to do nothing but talk about Low Roar for a while because
yeah.
that's what it is. We'll go all the way through from 2010 up to present day, basically.
Yeah. So we might be saving that.
Yeah,
And
we could just start with that next time or something.
which I think would be really cool. So everybody watching, we could all have the same homework assignment. Let's go listen to some Low Roar records.
Go listen to Low
And then we'll
Roar.
come
There's
back
a
and
lot
have
to
some-
listen to, but yeah.
Yeah. That'll be great. All right. That was the Lincoln. Anything else to add about the Lincoln Park record?
No, I think that's that covers it.
Yeah. Shadow of the Day was part of that record, right?
I'm terrible with song titles. I don't know.
I believe it was.
You would have to look that up.
Yeah, I believe it was.
Because also song titles were changing because they're working on stuff, and
Yeah.
lyrics weren't finished. And
Yeah. What you made the Pro Tools session name was not what the final name on the record was.
yeah, that's weird, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Song number 11.
Right. Exactly. Which one is 11?
But To be fair, that's actually one of the really funny things with the Chili Peppers that happened a lot, where
Hmm.
there would be a temporary title, and then Anthony would write lyrics about it, which made it the final title. Like there's a song called Long Progression, and
Hmm.
it's because there's a really long chord progression. So that's what they were calling it. So they knew what the
Yeah.
hell song they were talking about. And then he wrote lyrics about a long progression.
There you go. It was the writing
Yeah.
prompt for it.
Yeah,
Nice.
exactly.
All right, I'm letting everybody in the chat know how to spell the name for Low Roar. Cool. There was a question. This is back about the Neve stuff. I think somebody asked if you worked on the. I don't know if this will sound right. I'm going off of memory. I meant to ask you earlier. They were asking if you worked on the console at Conway. Oh yeah, here we go. The 8108 console that was at Conway for a while. That was from Urs
Um,
Wise Danger.
no, no. The
Hmm.
8100 series. There are some that sound really good, but
Hmm.
that was a series after the 80 series. And there were a lot of them that had, I mean, just huge problems. I don't remember which model numbers were good and which weren't, but like those had little like logicy push buttons where you'd hold something and then hit another button somewhere else in the console and that would route to the buses. You didn't actually have assigns on them.
Yeah.
And the patch bays to make all this happen were full of FET transistors. Like you were going through electronics in and out of the
Mm,
patch bay, and they had bleed. They had like tons of bleed where if you had a click track going, it would be everywhere.
mm,
Like it would
right.
make it onto every track.
Yeah.
So it, yeah, I there are some that sound really good, but I avoided them like the plague because I had a
Mm.
couple of bad sessions with them, and like, okay, I'm never going to use those again. Thank you.
It only takes one session like that, probably,
Yeah,
just to be like, yeah,
yeah,
right. Uh, okay, so this is 2006 in the All Music, but U2 18 singles. You have a
yeah,
mixing credit with U2.
yeah.
I had a slight obsession with U2.
You and several million people.
Yeah, yeah. Please tell
So
me what it was like to mix a
okay,
U2 song.
so
Yeah.
this was in the middle of the Linkin Park record, and
Hmm.
Brad especially was not happy because we'd been doing guitars. Like the two of us would sit in there and find amps and really do that. And then Rick said, "Well, we're going to London for I think it was 3 weeks to work on this U2 thing." I mean, and I worked for Rick. Like Linkin Park's budget was paying me, but Rick is the one who brought me on the project. And so it's not like I could say no. And it's not, I mean, obviously, that opportunity, I didn't really want to say no to going to work
Yeah.
with you two at Abbey Road. It
Right.
sucked that it was in the middle of a project, but it was also because we couldn't like make a big deal that it even existed. Like I couldn't tell those guys it was coming
Right.
up. It was like a
Oh.
couple days before where it was like, and I ended up having to tell them. And so I just felt like crap about it. But
Yeah.
okay, so got that out of the way. So I go, Greg Philman and I went, and we go to Abbey Road to set up to record U2. And so the song, what we're doing was two songs to go on that U2 18. So one of them is Windows in the Sky, which is the one
Hmm.
that I ended up mixing. And then the other one is a cover of The Saints Are Coming, which is an old punk
Yeah.
song. It's not the Saints marching in.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And that one was like, oh, by the way, Green Day is going to come in and do that with us. Like, what? Yeah, tomorrow.
Ah,
Green Day's coming. And so we had to set up a whole nother band's worth of stuff, and because
yeah.
they tracked it together. But it was amazing. We were in Studio 2 at Abbey Road. We set up, and one of the things that was a little weird, there was a guy who played keyboards with him in the studio and helped like map stuff out and did click tracks and whatever. Like he was sort of an
Hmm.
extra musician who did a lot of stuff in the studio. And I will not remember his name because some neurons just don't fire anymore.
I can't
But really
remember. I
nice
used to
guy.
know that too. I don't remember.
And
Just from being a fan like that.
so we set up a bunch of keyboards. And okay, so there are a few things about setting up the studio, but the first thing was, so physically, like we got the drum kit set up, we got the bass rig set up, vocal station, guitars, and all that. And then it was like, well, okay, but there's the grand piano, there's the upright piano, the Mrs. the one,
Yeah.
that one,
Yeah.
the really out of tune. Anyway,
We
barrel.
show it
Yeah,
on the start to finish series.
yeah, exactly,
So yeah, yeah.
exactly. And then there's a Mellotron, there's a Rhodes, and all this. And so Bono comes in, and the first thing he says, because the control room's upstairs, so he's looking down through the window at the studio. He says, "Well, it looks like a keyboard showroom." I'm like, fuck, there's no keyboard player in the band. So
Oh
we had to
no.
completely reset up the room and sort of push all the keyboards off to one side and really make it about them. And then they'd gotten this old like Beatles era Ludwig kit to play.
Hmm.
And so we're getting a sound with the drum tech and getting a sound, and there's no hole in the front head. And we're like, man, the drum sounds cool, but this will never work. Like, we know this won't work. And
Yeah.
his other kit was there. So like, let's just take the kick drum and put his other kick drum in. Because
Mm-hmm.
like, we know the sound isn't going to work. And they are notorious for like, they're just coming by to say hi and we'll start recording in 2 days. They see the studio, they just go down and play. Like, you've
Right.
got to be ready for everything all the time. And so we switched the kick out, and then they came in and he was livid. Like, I got the kit for this thing. And so we're just trying to say like, well, it's just because of the hole in the head.
Right.
And like, we had no rapport with the band, and it was like the worst way to start ever. So we ended up with, and he's like, well, you could just put a hole in the head on the other kit. Like, oh, okay. Like, we didn't want to mess with the kick. We thought that would be worse than
Right.
just swapping
Then
it
just
out.
swapping the drum. Yeah.
So anyway, so we got that going, and we started
Mhm.
tracking with them, and it was great. I mean, they're amazing, and it is total chaos.
Yeah.
Like, there's just so much going on all the time. And the Edge remembers every single thing he has ever played. Ever.
Yeah.
They had done demos of these songs months before, and they'd be playing, and he'd say, oh man, we need to get the sound from that part that I played, the little arpeggio thing, and I use this guitar, and his guitar tech was all over it.
Mm.
And he'd be like, oh, right. And he'd have photos of the pedal board set up, which amp, and like in minutes, they'd be right back there. Or it would be, I want to fly in 2 bars of the thing that I played on the telly through the thing. And the guitar can say, great, yep, that's from this date, and it's take this.
Wow.
Fly it
Yeah.
in. So tons of stuff like that. There was one point where we were just going to, I think we were punching in the bass on the bridge of the song. And then like, okay, cool. And then we looked down and the whole band is playing. And like, what? So we started punching in the bridge to a song that was not cut to a click.
Oh wow.
The
Yeah.
entire band. And then you got to punch out and just sort of
Right.
see where the hell you are. Like,
Oh
it was,
man. Yeah.
and then every night there'd sort of be this to-do list of just stuff that people had kind of mentioned, and Greg and I would
Yeah.
be there till 2 or 3 in the morning every night,
Yeah.
and then kind of walk back to the hotel to try and decompress.
Yeah.
And then when Green Day showed up, I was there for the first day when they were there to kind of help get set up, but then I had to go to SARM to start mixing the Windows in the
To-
Sky song while they were
Uh-huh.
tracking the other one. But at that point, so this is the second time that Xanthi thought I was cool. SpongeBob was the first. But while I was doing that, she was a gigantic Green Day fan. Like, she listened to
Yeah.
Green Day. We were talking about this not that long ago. Debbie had to play the same music in the car on the way to school every single morning. And
Yeah.
at that point, it was Green Day, American Idiot, for months.
Yeah.
Months.
She has good taste.
And so I'm there at the session, and I tell her, like, oh, Green Day's coming in, and she's kind of losing her mind about it. So I went over one evening and got pictures of them holding up a sign that said, hi, Xanthi.
Oh
And
wow.
like Mike Dirnt's got it
Yeah.
upside down. And so pictures of all 3 of them holding up this sign. And like at that point, you couldn't email them because they were too big. And I put them on an
Yeah.
FTP site, and like I sent the link to Debbie, and she clicked the link and she managed to get it on the screen. I said, okay, well, give Xanthi the phone and let her come in. And there's just silence. And Debbie gets back on the phone and just said she can't speak. Which was
That's
really
awesome.
amazing. So that
Yeah.
was really cool. So yeah, so I was working, mixing that song over at SARM. And you had to have a vocal mic set up in the control room at all times because Bono would just walk in
Just
and
in
want to
case.
sing.
Yeah. Right.
So yeah, it was kind of nuts.
Yeah.
And
That
then
sounds
we
so
went back.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And Rich
What an
Costi was there
experience.
mixing as well. So we had two mix rooms going while Greg was tracking, and Greg was
Yeah.
mixing when he wasn't tracking. And
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's crazy.
crazy.
Did you track vocals for that?
Greg was doing most of the tracking because after a couple of days, we realized
You
I
went,
was
yeah.
disappearing. So
Hmm.
I was helping out with everything while I was still there, but Greg was the main tracking engineer once we got
Yeah.
going.
Yeah. Awesome. Um, Dave Westner asked, Bono's favorite vocal mic is?
SM7. Well, no, SM58. And we
Yeah.
tried to get him on an SM7, and it sounded better, but he's like, I don't like holding this thing. So it's a 58. Always a 58.
Yeah. Super Eventide asks, is a Beta 58?
I don't know. It's a 58.
It's a 58.
Look,
It's just a 58.
let me say something here. The Beta is like, it's Bono. It doesn't matter.
It's the Bono
It really
58.
doesn't. I mean, the
Yeah.
fact that so many of his vocals are on a 58 in
Yeah.
the control room with the speakers cranked,
Hmm.
it just doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Pretty sure it was just a regular old 58.
Yeah. This might be from a while ago. Super Eventide said, Mark, the keys player is Terry Lawless.
Yes.
Which keys player was that for? I got lost at Bono.
The guy who was, I'm trying to remember if it was Terry then. It probably was. He was the guy who was playing keyboards and kind of getting stuff together for the session for them.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Dave says it might matter to Bono about the mic.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I really don't. He picks it up, it feels good in his hand, and he sings.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not trying to be flippant about it, but like that's
Right.
not, some places are going to have betas, some places are not.
Yeah.
And he's not carrying one. He just expects it to be there in the control room. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Crazy. I don't know what else there is to say about that. I would love to talk about that for another hour, but I think we did it.
I mean, it was literally 3 weeks, start to finish. And then I
Yeah.
tweaked the mix once I got home. Like I'd printed endless versions of things and groups of things because I knew it wasn't done. Yeah.
This was the second period of your life where you were like, if only I could build Bounce Factory.
Yeah. It was on an SSLJ, and yeah. And I even experimented with taking the direct out of every single track and recording that to make myself kind of a new processed multi-track.
Right.
That didn't work at all. That sounded terrible. But it took me, a day and a half to do it.
Yeah. Why did that sound terrible?
I don't know. Just didn't work.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Meh.
All right. Moving on. Here, there's a name on here I'm not familiar with. Fight Star.
Everybody has to say bye to Debbie because she's going.
Yeah.
Oh. All right. Bye, Debbie.
Bye, Debbie.
Bye.
See ya.
Hang out.
Yes.
Now get out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Fight Star was, I want to see if I get this right. I believe Matt Wallace was producing that record. If you look up the rest of the credits, I'm pretty sure that was Matt. And for some reason, he wasn't going to mix it. Double check that just to make sure I'm thinking of the right record. I'm almost positive.
Fight Star.
Yeah, but I mean, that was a record. I mixed it and it went pretty well, and then it was done. But
All right.
yeah,
I actually don't know this record.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to add that to my listen list that I should have listened to before this. Awesome.
Quite
All right.
Everybody
Let's go
has
on
stuff
to
going on.
The next. Treasure Planet. James Newton Howard.
Yeah, there's a song that was used on the soundtrack album, and
Mm-hmm.
it was something I'd worked on before. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Next. Thank you very
Next.
next.
uh, dun dun dun. A little record called Death Magnetic.
Death Magnetic.
Death Magnetic.
All right. It's loud. What else do you want to know?
Next. Let's see.
Yep.
We got. Sorry. No, I mean, there's so much to talk about with this one. You did some tracking on it, according to the internet, or just mixing?
No, I'm pretty sure it was just mixing. I think it was completely tracked before I came on it. And
that was Greg, right?
Yeah, that was Greg.
Yeah.
And this was another one where he'd been working on the record for a really long time. He'd started mixing, but they still had some overdubs to do. And he was at Village, I think, mixing. And for whatever reason, like the first song wasn't really coming together. And so Rick's like, okay, well, let's have Andrew do a mix and you can go back to finishing up the overdubs and whatever else was going on. And it just, like, the first mix went well. And so, okay, now you and Greg are mixing this record. Like, okay, great. I mean,
Right.
It was sort of, like the Chili Peppers thing. Like, all right, these two guys will mix the record.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
It was a ton of drum tracks, and that is why I bought the expansion for the console. There was just too much stuff, and it was really specific as to whether we were going to use this set of overheads or that set of overheads. And like the overheads were left, center, right, because it was such a big kit that they were tracked basic tracks all done at Sound City on the now infamous console that a certain Foo Fighter bought, but that console been making records for a hell of a long time. Tracked in that room, and I mean, meticulously recorded. Greg is such a great engineer, just insane. And those guys are amazing players. Like, James's rhythm guitar is his right hand is a machine,
right,
in a really good way. Like, just crazy how good he is. You'd get doubled guitars and you're like, this can't be doubled. It's one performance. There's no fucking way this is doubled. And it was doubled.
Wow. Like, this would be phasing out if they didn't change it. Change the guitars.
I just mixing that for a really long time, and we mixed it. And what do you want to know? Because there's stuff I'm not going to talk about.
I mean, there's questions I can't ask. Right.
And the only thing that makes it different from every other Metallica record from that era, which all of them became a huge controversy with the fans. The fans never liked anything, and the Saint Anger was an interesting choice on the snare. Like, I mean, there's stuff, and their fans are rabid. They love, love, love that band. But at the same time, a lot of them will just say, well, there hasn't been anything good since Ride the Lightning, or, there's a big thing about the early Metallica that is, I mean, it's impossible to live up to. And I think one of the things that Rick is really good at is sort of making bands revisit what made them great early on in terms of the songwriting and stuff. But bands have moved on, they grow and they do stuff, and obviously different bass player. And so the thing that made the controversy after that record a problem, two things. One was Guitar Hero. So we had to make stems for that record. And everyone's like, oh, well, if I do the Guitar Hero right, it doesn't sound anything like the record. It's got so much headroom. And like, where do you think those stems were made from?
Right.
They are made from the final mix. Like, the mix was on the console, and then we made some stems. So that's the first thing. Like, it's not like, oh, that didn't have this processing on it or that processing. And then the other problem was, normally there's controversy like that, especially with a Metallica record, where it comes out and people are complaining about stuff and nobody says anything, and then it goes away. And some of the fans still hate the record and some don't. And somebody decided to talk about it, and they talked about it on the internet, and they threw Greg and I under the bus. And I got death threats. I got all kinds of stuff. And this is like way before Trump. So people didn't
Right.
really act like
You're like, it
that
wasn't
at that
normalized
point.
then. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly. So, I mean, and that's what made it work. And yes, that album is really, really loud. Uh, and I don't really want to say any more than that. I mean, I got stuff I could say that would make Greg and I maybe look a little better or not or whatever, but it
Yeah.
doesn't matter. The thing that I will always say about that record is even with things like sound check on Apple Music and Spotify and whatever, it doesn't sound quiet. There you
Hmm.
go. And if you
Hmm.
play it out of very small speakers, it is still aggressive as hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
mixes work. They translate. If you crank it up, it does not have a lot of headroom. I will absolutely agree with that. But
Hmm.
that's just a fact about the record. That's not a judgment.
Well, yeah. And, well, of course, the other thing is that you won the loudness war. It's like your
Exactly.
famous
It's
thing, right?
over
You're like,
now. I
I
won.
won.
I
The
won.
end. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um,
I'm going to get crucified on the internet because I just said that the record is loud, but the mixes work. And they're going to be all these people saying, no, it's too loud. And you just said headroom is bad and dynamic range is no good. And I didn't say anything like that. All
yeah.
I'm saying
Yeah.
is that record sounds like that record.
Right. And it doesn't, not to go on about this, but like, it's not like every one of your mixes sounds that way. There was a reason that that record sounded that way. There was an intention
Well,
behind it. It wasn't
and
an
also,
accident, you know?
do people think that like the band and the producer checked out and like,
Right.
hey,
Yeah.
Greg, you and Andrew, just finish that fucking thing and get it
Yeah.
out.
We're
I
not
don't
even
need
going to
to hear
listen
it.
to it. Ship it. Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway,
So,
and
yeah.
that's the
But,
way.
I wanted to go back to the multi-track of that though, because, there, like when you got the record, you had roughs, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Um, the Saint Anger snare was the Saint Anger snare, you
yeah, it
know?
was not on this record.
Well, that was on Saint Anger for the other
Trust and
thing.
Pain.
Yeah,
Right.
right. But it's baked into the multi-track, right?
Well, I mean, you mean on Saint Anger? I don't know. I mean, I didn't
Yeah,
see
I
the
mean,
multi.
but also Death Magnetic, right? Like
Well, no,
the
that's magnetic. The snares are on. You know what?
wait,
Where'd
oh,
you
I lost
go?
myself. Hold on. No, I
Yeah, I mean
mean,
well, no. The whole thing about Saint Anger is the snares are off. It's more like a timbali, and it's tuned to the song.
right,
Death
right,
Magnetic is it's drum kit with a normal snare. You
right.
know, yeah.
But that stuff is baked into the multi-track, meaning it's the producers and the band's choice going
It
into it.
is.
It's not a thing
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
done by the
yeah,
mix
yeah,
engineer
yeah.
at the
It's
end or
all
whatever.
tracked
Yeah.
with intention,
Hmm.
absolutely, especially with someone like Greg.
Yeah.
That is tracked, but it's not. Those mixes are not faders up. I mean, it took a long time to get the mixes right and all that, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's tracked great with great players in a great studio. And I know there are a lot of
Yeah.
people who are like, oh, Andrew, he's whatever, but he always gets stuff that sounds amazing. In that particular case, I got great tracks, and that is absolutely true. And that is
Yeah.
not always the case. But yeah, I mean, on the Rick stuff, if it doesn't sound good, you're not recording yet,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So
Yeah. Nice. So it was just the mixing on that one. Uh,
yeah.
and this was done on the console
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one I got the expansion for. So the drums were
Yeah.
on 1 through probably 12 on the first board, and then there were 12 more faders on the other board. So, but
Hmm.
right where it turned the corner. So I had 1 through 12, and then I had the last 12 channels just to the left of that. And so
Yeah.
24 outputs from Pro Tools for the drum kit,
Hmm.
and then the rest of it. So that gave me 12 more channels to get the main guitars and stuff like that right in front of me, then 8 more off to the side, and then I had the other 24, no, less than that, 24 effects returns and stuff like that.
Right. On the side. Yeah. Awesome. Um, are there any other fun stories from mixing that record besides the death threats?
Yeah, well, that was after mixing the record. I mean,
Right.
not really. It was just it was another Jason Gossman hang, which is always fun. I seem to remember, I'm pretty sure it was on that record, that it was really, really hot. And we'd
Mm.
put in a pond in the backyard, like a tiny, tiny little pond in the backyard of the house. And in the afternoons, we would go sit with our feet in the pond to cool off. And then we'd just go squelching back to the studio and like get back to work. But yeah, it was really, really hot. And then there was a really weird thing where I think because Debbie didn't want to like interrupt sometimes. So she would come in and Jason would be sitting right next to me and she'd say, "Would Jason like a cup of tea?" I'm like, well, he's right there. You can speak to him. But it happened all the time. She felt like
Hmm.
I might say, like, no, 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 we're right in the middle of something. And Jason would be like,
Hmm.
I'll have some tea, you know. But it was yeah, it was fun. But yeah, it was another one working at home, which was great.
Hmm.
Really great. Because as soon as you walk out of the studio, you're completely decompressed. It's not
Yeah.
like you go sit in the lounge, which is always a little weird and you're kind of waiting to go home, you
Right.
know.
Yeah. Nice. Very cool. There's some good chat stuff in here. No death threats, but let's see. We got
That's good.
yeah. You have to go too far to know how far too far is. Uh, let's see. The console lights were glowing red with purpose. I like that one. Nice.
Well, to be fair, there was actually a problem because Greg was mixing in at Sound Factory Studio B, so he was on an API, and the meters were so loud that he couldn't mix quietly.
Wow. That's
So
hilarious. Yeah. Clack,
yeah,
clack, 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 clack. Nice.
yeah.
Okay. Got yours asking, he said, I mean, you kind of just explained some of this, but he said you expanded the board for this album. How many drum tracks are we talking total? Is it a ton of room mics, top and bottom mics on toms? How crazy was it?
I don't remember specifically. I
Mm-hmm.
believe it was 26 microphones on the kit total.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, there were a couple different sets of overheads, and there were definitely a few different options for room mics. And those would be used differently on every song, sometimes section to section. I mean, a lot of the songs are really
Mm.
long and they've got different things. So there were lots of scene changes going on
Yeah.
throughout the songs. I don't remember if there were top and bottom toms, to be honest. Possibly. But yeah, I don't remember. I don't
Mm-hmm.
remember. I'm old.
Yeah. I'm curious. One song on a record like that, how long would that? Do you remember about how long it would take to do a mix?
No. I mean, it would
Yeah.
be several days,
Mm-hmm.
certainly.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine it would take me 2 days before I'd have anything for anyone to listen to.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then you had to wait. Like that was, it's the console time, so that thing stayed up on the board until it was approved.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd imagine 4 or 5 days per
yeah.
song before I was
Right.
printing anything.
Mm-hmm. I guess at that point you could probably email files, or were you having to drive tapes around for people to hear?
Well, not tapes. Um, I think we could send files. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Nice. All right. Chat room, if you guys have more questions that Andrew will answer about Death Magnetic, let us know. Cool. Okay. After that is Cass McCombs
Well,
dropping the
that's
rip.
yeah. That was really cool. I don't remember exactly how it came up,
Mhm.
but and I wasn't really aware of him, but whenever someone would say like a project might come, I would immediately just go listen to records, and even if it didn't happen, like
Mhm.
I wanted to know what was going on. And Cass is just a great songwriter and really interesting. Like the production was always interesting, and
Mm.
so that was mixed long before Metallica, because I didn't even have automation on my console when I mixed that. It was just the single 8068, no
Mhm.
automation. The recall for that is I had a ruler and just measured where the fader was on every channel.
Yeah.
Um, and that's also when I had possibly, I mean, I love Jason Gossman, but possibly the best assistant I've ever had. And I haven't had that many because I tend to just work on my own.
Mhm.
But this guy, Manuel Tomas, and he's from Spain. and Manu, he's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. He actually came to a few of the Mix of the Masters seminars I did to assist
Cool.
and stuff. And he's just one of the best people to have around ever. And I don't remember how it came up, but he got in touch, and maybe I was actually looking for an assistant at that point. And so he got in touch and he came over, and I really liked him. And then I just thought, man, I can't have an assistant because my hours are just weird. And it was at my house, and I don't know
Yeah.
how this is going to work. And he just refused to not be my assistant. So he was my
Awesome.
assistant. Like,
Yeah.
that was it. That was it. And we're
Yeah.
still really good friends to this day. He texted me a couple days ago because he got 3 Latin Grammy nominations this year,
Oh,
which
that's
is awesome.
awesome. Congrats. Yeah.
Super, super talented guy.
Yeah.
But anyway, so on that record, I think it was just Cass and I, after the first song, I just realized I really had some latitude to try things. And
Hmm.
it was also where the record wasn't necessarily done. Like, he was happy with it, but I think it was the label or maybe management was just saying, like, well, maybe you could work a little bit on some stuff. And so we listened to a song that I wasn't going to work on yet. And I would just like say, well, what about this and what about that? And then he would go off and do something totally different.
Mm.
Like, but I think it was just having a conversation about it made him kind of reopen it as something to think about in his mind. And there's one song where there was the solo section, and like, what are we going to do? Like, musically, it's really, really cool. And I think we tried a trombone solo or something like that. And it's like,
As we do.
yeah, as you do. And it's like, no, that's not really working. And so he said, what if we had like a deck of cards? Like, what do you mean? It's like, well, let's just put up the mic and I'll have a deck of cards. And so all the way through this one section in the song, he's just got a deck of, I think, tarot cards because they were bigger. And he's just like flipping through the deck. And it's awesome. It's
Sweet.
exactly enough stuff to get through the section without being like, what's this
Huh.
section for? But it doesn't get in the way of any of the cool stuff that was going on in the background. Like, it's absolutely brilliant.
Wow.
And then there was another song with the vocoder where really simple song. I think it was acoustic guitar and vocal, and then there was some stuff. And I'm like, man, the vocal just sounds exposed. I don't really know what to do because I don't like putting lots of reverb on things. And like, I probably could have done some delay reverb effects, but I just don't like it. And I thought, nah, I'm going to vocode the voice with the acoustic guitar. And it took me forever because you can kind of see it right on the edge of the. Hold on.
Hold on. Let me put you full screen here. Guest full screen. There you go. Oh, that's me.
No, that's you. That's you.
Where? That's me. Hold on. I don't
Hold
look like
on.
you. There we go. Are you?
Okay.
You're not mirrored now, are you?
Yeah.
No,
So where this is on the modular, where all this is patched, it's basically like a class A vocoder. Like, it's all of the bits that are inside of a vocoder, and you can tweak everything. So you can tweak the response of every single frequency band separately. And so I spent forever getting it just right. And it was one of those things where, like, I'd spent so much time on it. You kind of want someone to come in and go, oh my God, that's amazing, and whatever. And he came in and he listened to it like, oh, that's cool. So how am I going to do that? And that's when I had this little rack mount vocoder that was like a 7 or 8 band one. I'm like, okay, well, you have that. It's like, okay, cool.
nice.
So, yeah. Yeah,
super
so
cool.
it went really well. So it was really fun. It was really creative and in a way really low pressure because it was like people were asking for things to be different, but Cass is such a strong artist. Like,
Mm.
he was open to stuff, but it was like, nah, this record's done, man. Like, so we just did it and it was really fun.
Nice. Oh, that's really fun. Nice. Another one to check out. Okay, so this is not your first Neil Diamond record that you had worked on, but Home After Dark. You have an engineer credit.
You're
And I
saying that
believe-
wasn't the first one? What was the first one?
Not according to all music. You worked on 12 songs in 2005
Oh,
as well.
12
Yeah.
songs was the first one I worked on. Yes.
Mhm.
Sorry. Yeah. So I worked on 2. The first one, who does it say mixed 12 songs? I'm trying to remember because I don't think I did.
Home After. Oh, wait.
No, 12
you were
songs.
listed as an engineer on 12 songs.
Yeah.
So you might have done tracking on that.
Yeah. I tracked quite a bit of it. I may have tracked all of it. It's hard to remember because it was the two records. So this was at Neil's studio, which is where we
Mm.
knew of it to do the other session. And it was great. I mean, the band was insane. It was Smokey Hormel and Mike, you'll remember the name, from Tom Petty's band,
Oh,
playing,
yeah.
you know, him.
Oh
Uh,
my gosh.
and Benmont Tench playing keyboards. He's one of my favorite musicians in the world. Him and Greg Lees, like they play all the notes you forgot to play. Just
Nice.
unbelievable. So the whole band was great. So no drummer, tracking everything live in the room. And yeah, it was great. It was really, really fun. Matt Sweeney might have been
Wow.
playing on that one as well. I can't remember now. Um, yeah, and it was just, and Neil is, I mean, he's such a talent. His voice is insanely good. But that was another one where I believe on both of those records, where he would change a lyric. But of course, we tracked the whole thing live, so there's bleed into everything, and he
Mm.
was playing guitar on every take. And so he'd just want to change one line,
Yeah.
and he'd play, and I'd punch in, and it was like, this is 3 weeks later at a different time of day, and I don't even think that's the right guitar. Like,
Right. Right.
and then somehow within two takes, between me like frantically tweaking stuff and him hearing it back in his headphones, it'd be seamless, and we would just punch in, and like it worked. And there are probably 1,000 words on that record punched in, and you would never know.
Wow.
You'd absolutely never know.
Awesome.
Yeah, crazy,
That's on Home
crazy.
Before Dark,
Well, that
or the
was
first
12
song.
songs.
12
Yeah.
songs. Nice.
Well, Home
I
Before
want to.
Dark was, I mean, it was very similar. I don't know that I've even got them separate in my head, like exactly what was what. I think Dana Nielsen did a lot more engineering on the second one,
Mm.
and he was assisting
Awesome.
on the first one, from what I remember.
Yeah. Cool. Okay.
And I think that was the
That's pretty
first
neat.
time I worked with Dana. Yeah.
Hmm. Those will be fun listens as well. Okay, I got to put you back full screen here for a second
Uh-oh.
because we got to stop the show and answer this question. Those headphones on your desk are not Sony MDRs as noticed by the chat room.
Yep. So I've got my Sonys right here where I mix. They're right here.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Sonys. But then back here, I went with Joe Barisi. We went to Shure years ago and did like a little talk, and we met them, and they gave me a pair of these headphones. I don't remember the model number, and they're really, really good. I don't mix on them because I just am so used to the Sonys at the moment, but more on that in a second. But these are plugged into a little Dante headphone interface, and it's what I listen to when I'm doing the modular if I don't want to be in the speakers.
Mm.
So that's exactly what these are. These have the modular going in as well as the stereo mix out of Pro Tools, so I can mix and hear them both. And then I've also been doing a lot of listening to the Odyssey headphones, and they're really, really great, really great. And I'm trying to figure out if I could actually mix on them, and I don't know yet, but they sound amazing. So
Which
that's my
model are
thing.
you looking at?
I don't know. I listen to
Is
all
it the
of them.
Manny ones? Yeah.
The Manny ones are really cool too. I mean, that's the thing about them is they're very, very different as you go. And there's certain things where I feel like, ooh, if I could have the top end of that with the low end of that, then that would be like the really hi-fi version of the Sonys. But at the moment, I'm still using the Sonys. And I've actually talked to Chris Behrens at Odyssey, and I'm going to spend some time at their booth at AES.
Nice.
So,
Yeah.
and also, if you're going to AES, I will be doing an hour at the booth playing some low roar. And I think I'm going to do the Atmos version. So it'll be binaural at the booth in Odyssey headphones for an hour.
That would be the first time hearing Low Roar Atmos, right? You haven't done it yet.
I have only done one song.
Right.
And I've only played it. And I will be playing it through loudspeakers at the Neumann booth as well at the show.
Awesome. I need to get those times. What do you know what times?
I
want to be there. What times is that? I have to be there.
I can tell you when. Hold on. So and I got to put my calendar in Eastern time. So I'm at the Odyssey booth at noon on the Thursday, the 26th. And I'm doing the Sennheiser playback at 1 p.m. on Wednesday, the 25th.
First one was noon on.
Well, I mean, the first one chronologically is 1 o'clock on Wednesday is through speakers at the Sennheiser booth.
Cool.
Not at the booth, like they've got a room set up somewhere.
Is it public?
Yeah, as far as I
Can I
know.
get in?
I mean, yeah, yeah. I'll be playing a ton of Atmos stuff. Unfortunately, it's mostly the same stuff I was playing at NAMM, just because I haven't had time to decide anything. So, if you
Yeah.
came to NAMM and listened to my playbacks there, then you might have heard the stuff. But who cares? You want to hear it again.
Yeah.
And then 1 o'clock, no, noon on Thursday is
Cool.
at the Odyssey booth.
Cool. I will put this in the chat for everybody. Stand by.
Yeah. So if you're going to be at AES, that's what I'll be doing. And I do want to do the entire Low Roar catalog in Atmos. Yeah, we'll talk about it.
Awesome. All right. Right after that, King of Pop, 2008, Michael Jackson.
Yeah, it's just more
Engineer,
shit.
drum programming, executive producer.
Yeah, you can guess
Drums.
that that's all stuff from the other record.
Right. Right.
I do
Cool.
love that they get like a 3-second shot of the headphones while I'm trying to explain about a vocoder. Like, hold on a second. He's alive.
Stop! We
That's
saw
awesome.
it. There it is. There's going to be screenshots of that everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guys, let's all start like a internet conspiracy thing. Somebody
There's already there.
screenshot the headphones.
You know that the internet conspiracy is that I still mix on a console and I only say that I mix in the box to sell plugins. You've seen that one, right?
Well, I know it's true, but I think that we should screenshot the Shure headphones and start spreading a rumor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, we haven't gotten to all that, like the in the box switch yet. That's gonna come, and then
Yeah.
I'll ask you to please finally reveal the Neve on the side of the room.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I don't even
Nice.
I didn't sell the BCM10, but that's not here either. A friend has been renting it since the studio closed. So
Yeah. Nice. Okay. I believe that we're up to the Duke Spirit Neptune mixing.
yeah. So their manager, for some reason, said, "Hey, we should get Andrew to mix a couple songs." And so I'd heard of the band. I listened to a couple of things. They're super cool band, like noisy in a really great way. And Leela, the front woman, the singer, is just an absolute fucking star. I mean, everyone in the band is great, but she's like the real indie rock and roll blondie. Like, I mean, such a presence on stage, kind of amazing. And so super excited. Mixed 2 songs. They're really particular. And in some ways, I don't know that I was a great fit because I mix, I mean, everyone's going to say like, what? But I mix relatively clean compared to the kind of, especially the sort of English lo-fi rock thing, and not lo-fi in an affected way, just, the way the stuff is mixed. So it was a little different, but I think they ended up really liking it because it's the next Duke Spirit record that I've got a lot more to say about. But that one, yeah, just mixed 2 songs and was really into it. And then went to, when I was in England, saw them live, which was incredible. No, actually, I saw them live in LA, and such a good band live. Really amazing.
Awesome. I'm still stuck on the clean thing. Going back, so Death Magnetic. Okay, so after this, we've got the International Noise Conspiracy.
Yes.
And you did a couple records with them.
Yes. So
Cross
the
of My Calling was
first,
the first. Yeah.
yeah, the first record, I did a bunch of overdubs to finish it off. It was another one of those where I came in. I finished recording all the vocals with Dennis. I think some percussion, some stuff like that. But so for people who do not know, first of all, it's a great band. Dennis Lixon is the singer. He is from a band called Refused. If you do
Mm.
not know who Refused is, you need to pause this unless you're watching it live. And you need to go listen to everything they ever did, but start with The Shape of Punk to Come. What are you doing? You're gone. You're going to go listen.
I'm doing a bit.
No, man, you're watching this live. Remember, I said if you're not watching it live. Well, I suppose technically you're not watching it; you're in it. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you should do
Right.
that. So, and I just re-listened to a bunch of those records recently, and holy shit, they're good. And
Mm.
Dennis is an amazing singer. So, International Noise Conspiracy was sort of his second big project with the band. And so I came in and I did all that. But one of the cool things that happened during that, the first record, was The Two Towers came out, the second of the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies.
Hmm.
And they were
Which you were in,
doing,
according to Greg Wells.
what's that?
You were in, according to Greg Wells.
Yeah, yeah,
You were
thou shalt
in
not
the two.
pass.
Yeah, yeah,
Thou shalt not high pass.
right.
So Greg loved that. I think it's really funny. He thinks it's like one of the best things ever
Best memes
in
on
the
the internet.
history of the internet. Like that's, and
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
it's pretty
But
good.
it's also, you're standing on scaffolding on your own
Right,
house, freaking
right.
out. So anyway,
Yes.
so
Two Towers
there's
came
a
out.
screening at the Cinerama Dome in
Hmm.
in Hollywood, and Howard Shore is going to talk afterwards about some of the music. I think, yeah. So it's like really early in the morning, and I say, Dennis, man, you want to go to this thing? It's like, yes, definitely, let's go. Just pick me up at the hotel at, like, I don't know. It started at 9:30, so like, well, yeah, we'll get there for 9, and we show up at 9, and the line is around the block.
Hmm.
And we're like, fucking hell, we're not going to make it in here. And we were the last people in, except for about 10 other people. And so we sat in the front row in the middle, like in the Cinerama Dome. I mean, it was like this the whole
Oh
time.
my gosh!
And it was fucking amazing.
Wow.
Absolutely amazing. So, and just while I'm telling Dennis stories, because I mean, I haven't spent a huge amount of time with him, but
Hmm.
two of my favorite stories ever. So that one is one. And then we were at Coachella because they played. It was like the sort of reforming of Refused to play Coachella. But it was also the same year that the Hives were playing. And
Hmm.
I just mixed the Hives record. And so Dennis and I went to see the Hives play. And so when you're lucky and you can go backstage, they have these little VIP sort of corrals that are near the stage and you can get to them from backstage. So you can actually just sort of wander out and see the show and you're pretty close, which is very elitist and horrible, but I'm a
Right.
white male born in North America and I'm really, really lucky.
Yeah.
So Dennis and I go out, and I'm pretty sure Debbie was with us too. We go out into the little corral and we're watching the Hives. And Pele is one of the best frontmen ever.
Yeah.
Like the persona he has for that band. If you watch any of the promo stuff for this new record they've got going right now, it is so funny. Like they did all their promo in a hearse because the thing is called The Death of Randy Fitzsimmons. And the caption on all the pictures is putting the fun back in funeral, which is, it's
Oh my
so
gosh.
good. So he did this thing on that tour where he would, like, they're in the middle of a song and then they do sort of the vamp, real quiet.
Hmm.
And he talks, he says some shit, and then he wants the entire crowd to sit down. Because then, of course, he's going to explode and everyone jumps to their feet. And it's like such an amazing moment. But Coachella, it's full of cool people. So cool people don't really want to sit down. And this is during the day. This isn't like an end of the night thing. So Pele's just like, we're not going to do anything until everybody sits down. Everybody has to sit down. And then he looks over and he says, even you, Dennis. And it's like, okay. And he sat down, which is fantastic. So that's that.
That's
Then the
awesome.
second, are we talking about both Noise Conspiracy records at
Yeah.
once? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
We can. Yeah.
So then the second one, I don't think I recorded anything for it, but I was mixing it. And I was mixing it at my place on the Neve.
Hmm.
And Rick was in the middle of another record, and it was taking a lot of time to get back to me. And these mixes would just sit on the console. And I felt bad, but like when you have a studio like that, you have to charge something for the studio by the day. Like you
Right.
have to.
Yeah.
And so it took longer than it should have, but I think they were really happy with it. And I love doing it. I think it's a really
Right.
cool record, and it's a great band. Dennis, he has a lot to say in a really good way, like in a Rage Against the Machine way. Like he's got a
Right.
really solid message that he will just keep going after always. And
Yeah.
it's a great band, and it was really fun to mix. And there was one song in particular I remember where the song just sort of started, and it started out of nowhere. And it's like, well, that doesn't work. Like, what am I going to do? I need to make some sort of intro for this.
Mm.
And one of the guitars doesn't come in during the intro. And it was tracked with the band in the room. And I was just like looking for source material. And I soloed up that guitar, and the drums going through the pickup on the guitar into the amp sounded really cool. Like super lo-fi and weird. So I just lifted that out and put that as a little like 2-bar drum thing going into the song. So instead of the song just sort of starting, you've got this weird, quiet, lo-fi drum thing, and then the band just fucking explodes coming
Wow.
in. And that's
Yeah.
one of the first mixes I can remember where Rick was like, this sounds great. Like on the first mix. I mean, obviously there's always
Yeah.
stuff to tweak, but usually it's like, okay, cool, this is good, but got to do this and that and that. And he was just like, he was all over that mix.
That's
And to
it.
me, that
Yeah.
was the most fucked up mix on the record.
Wow. So you
So
you felt the least strong about that one, and then he loved it.
it wasn't that I thought that it was cool, but it like that aesthetic ended up carrying through the mix. It was not the typical like very punchy kick snare. It was much dirtier than usual, but it worked. I mean, it's what worked for the song.
Yeah. Would Rick comment on things like that? Would he be like, your transient punch? Or was it solely off a feel?
No, I mean, sometimes it would get slightly specific, like, need more presence on the vocal. And, he meant the presence sort of mid-range stuff, like,
right.
using studio terms. It wasn't just all like, make it more purple. And it would be like, the kick isn't hitting me hard enough, or it could be super specific, but it was never like, you should use this compressor on there, or slow down the attack time on this. Like that wasn't the thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So let's go on to your next one. I'm trying
I feel
to
like
find...
this rehearsal is going well. We should definitely stream something at some point.
Maybe. We'll see.
Okay.
We'll have to review the tapes.
Okay.
The tapes. I am scouring to try and find Greg's famous meme, because the chat is like, what are they talking about?
Greg's famous meme. Which one?
Yeah. The thou shalt not high pass.
Oh, it was on his Instagram account for
I found the one of him, Guillaume, and Fab, or you, Guillaume, and Fab as the Three Stooges with the Release the interview. Here's one of you as Darth Vader.
Really into Photoshop for a minute.
He really did.
Yeah.
Hold on, I gotta share this with everybody. Hold on, let me do this, and okay. This is what we've been talking about. Here is Andrew.
No, that's not it.
As Darth. No, I know, but this is one of the many here.
Yeah, he really abused me on Instagram for a while.
I'm
not sure why.
He really did. Okay, there. Wait, let's see.
This is going
very
well.
weird. Yeah, this is great. It's going as good as Greg's Photoshop. Okay. Okay, so there is that one, and we had this is Fab, Andrew, and Guillaume. Guillaume is one of the masterminds behind Puremix there.
This is the
Three
first time his face
Stooges.
has been on the internet, so you might want to take that down immediately.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
He hates that.
He's gonna love that. Okay. And I thought that your Lord of the Rings one was around. He put it up a couple times. Okay.
Yeah. It's a good
Wow,
thing
he
you
really
didn't
went with this
compare
Vader
this.
one.
Oh yeah. Well, how about the Bert and Ernie one that was down a little bit right there?
Oh yeah, that's I remember this one. Yeah. Yeah. So Greg, this is before Greg Wells' Between Two Shares, which we're going to get to. But his interview came out, and he was just terrorizing Fab, Guillaume, and Andrew on Instagram. And
Uh,
here is a version of it.
no. But that's not the original picture.
It's not
The
the original.
original is worth.
You at your house there, right?
Yeah. I wonder if he actually. I mean, come on.
Uh,
I'm assuming he posted
wow.
the original at some point.
I thought that he did around this time. This is just he really went crazy here.
Yeah,
I forgot how
he
nuts
was
this
adamant that
was.
we release the Between Two Shores.
Uh,
And that was the thing. He threatened us with doing that every single day until we released it.
yeah. Yeah. And he kept true to his word for a little while.
Yeah. Was his the first one that got released? I don't
It
remember.
was because he terrorized you guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, that one, it's probably further
Well,
down. This
never
isn't
give
great
in to
TV. So,
terrorists. So,
yeah. There you go.
well, maybe you'll find this for the next one.
There you go. That's
That
what
might
we
be a
shall
better
do.
use of our time.
Debatable. Who's producing this show? All right. Let's see. So going on from there, we mentioned this a little bit on the last one because we had Chris Shaw on, the
Yeah.
brilliant Chris Shaw. The Weezer Red album.
Yeah.
Cool. Next one.
Well, yeah, we actually talked quite a bit about that one, about where we recorded and stuff like that. So I don't know that there's a whole lot left to say on that one, because we talked about recording at the Civic Center in Santa Monica, getting not Santa Monica in Malibu, and having to put sand in the walls because we had the bass amp in the breastfeeding booth.
Right. Yeah. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So I
Now,
think
I mean, any going into that record, I mean, were you referencing the older records or anything like that? Is there anything to
no. I
share?
mean, while tracking, especially with Rick, I wouldn't reference anything because
Mm-hmm.
there was probably no point.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously, I'm very
You knew
aware of
Weezer.
the
Yeah.
earlier Weezer stuff, but no, I mean, it's like the thing that I discovered, and I think I said this last time, is that I'm sure I did, is that Rivers just loves pop songs. Like he loves the songs,
Mm-hmm.
but the settings he puts them in are just, like you wouldn't think of them. Like some of the sort of more kitschy stuff, you say like, "Oh yes, well that's a thing," but all of this stuff is meant to be like really, um, great songs is first,
Mm-hmm.
and then the gigantic guitars is second.
Right. Right. Yeah. Very cool. Did you engineered on this one?
Yeah.
So it was. Did you do a majority of the tracking for it?
Yeah, I mean, well, this was another one where I had to go. I think it was that I was going to do a Mix with the Masters seminar that
Mm.
was already booked like long before.
In
So I
08.
worked on most of it, and then Dave Schiffman came in and took over for me when I was out of town.
Mm-hmm.
And oh God, I'm so bad with names. He wasn't the only one. Then someone else took over a bit, and oh man, I feel so bad. Like you could be looking up the rest of the credits and telling me, but you refuse to do that.
I'm
So
looking at Greg's Instagram. Yeah, busy.
um anyway, so I did. I mean, I
Okay, wait. I can
certainly
tell you. Hold on.
I started the
Let's see.
record at Shangri-La, and then we went to Malibu. And so yeah, I did all of the tracking up to a point, and then I was out of town for a little bit. And then like with the Linkin Park record, Dave did that, and oh come on,
So I have the engineers from this. So Tom McFall,
yeah,
Dana Nielsen,
yeah,
Dave Schiffman, Scott Schreiner. It was a composer. Sorry.
yeah.
Uh, that is all you get. Eric J. Dubowski.
We did some
Philip.
tracking at Eric's place. We did some drums there. Yeah, but that's not who I'm thinking of. And yeah, Dana was on that with me, and then
Philip
Steve.
Brossard Jr. was an assistant,
Yeah, yeah.
and Ken Sluter
Ken
was an
Sluter,
assistant.
that's who I was talking about. Yes, so Ken did quite a bit with them as well, um, on that record. But yeah, I mean, I did the first however many months, and
Hmm.
then yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
super fun.
Yeah. Uh, for, I mean, this is kind of a global question. Would you end up tracking just like double the amount of what would go on a record typically with a lot of these, or the amount of
It
songs?
depends. It
Hmm.
depends. I mean, sometimes there'd be, a couple extra songs, and then like with the Chili Peppers, there were 38 songs for Stadium Arcadium, and there were 50 for By the Way.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah, you track what you got.
Yeah. Crazy. All
Yeah.
right. Would you normally see all of those go through to like completion? I mean, they'd all get mixed
Well, it
and.
depends.
Hmm.
I believe that everything for Stadium Arcadium was finished completely. And then the 50 for By the Way, it was all done except for Josh's background vocals and just some overdubs. And it was mostly stuff that Josh was going to do. So when we did the sorry, I'm With You, not By the Way. I'm With You was the one with 50 songs. And then when we did I'm Beside You, which was the series of 7 inches that got put out,
Mm.
so we put out another 17 songs from that record. Josh came over, we did his background vocals, we did his guitars, and then I mixed, and then those came out. And that's a whole thing. Like, I suppose we'll talk about that record at some point when it comes up. But yeah, the doing those, I mean, they're not B-sides because they're A-sides. They're all A-sides. But
Hmm.
almost everything got used from both of those records.
Wow. Yeah. Crazy. Okay. So I'm not familiar with this record. 2009, the Audrey sessions.
Well,
You
that is
have some cool
when
credits.
Ryan from Low Roar comes into the picture.
Ah.
He was the singer in that band.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So Audrey Sessions, they did a record, and it was produced. I can't remember the guy's name, but someone else had produced it, and he worked at Eric Valentine's studio in Hollywood. So they showed up and they made the record, and then I got a call from their A&R guy or manager, I guess, because
Hmm.
they'd put the record out themselves, and then they got picked up by a small label, and they wanted the album remixed. And so, like, great. I mean, I really like the record, but there were some things, and this is, there's obviously there are never any right or wrong choices, but there were a few songs where I felt like the drum parts like weren't helping the songs. Like, they were really a little, I don't know, they just didn't seem to fit to me
Hmm.
aesthetically. And so I talked to the band and said, like, look, what do you think about this? Because like the last thing you want to do is to go to a band and they love their record and say that sucks, because it didn't
Hmm.
suck. It just like different. And they're like, you know what? We actually feel the same way about this now. And so we went into and so then when the manager came over to play me the record, like I don't even know why that happened, but normally they just send you a CD or whatever. But he came over and we were listening to it. And I think it was because I'd said, like, look, I have some ideas for this thing. So we got together, we're listening to the record. And then he said, oh, and by the way, they sent me another song from their rehearsal room. And he put it on, and it was like, holy shit,
Hmm.
this is better than anything on the record. So we booked 2 days at Sunset Sound Factory in Studio A. Was it 2 days? It may have only been one day. I don't even remember, but it was super fast. I think we had 2 days. So we had one day in a rehearsal room where we worked out the arrangement of the one song from their rehearsal, and then they had another song that was like, oh, hold on.
Hmm.
Not only is this amazing, this is the first single. Like, there's no fucking way this is not the first single. The lyrics weren't written. It didn't matter. Like, it
Wow.
was awesome. So we cut those two songs from scratch, and in the rehearsal room, we worked out the bridge and like wrote the bridge for the song and got the arrangement together for both of the new songs. Then we went in, we recut the drums, tracked those two songs start to finish, other than the vocal on the one that didn't have the lyrics finished. Then I started mixing at my place, and they were staying at the Sportsman's Lodge, which is an infamous little hotel on Ventura Boulevard in Studio City, which I don't know if it's still there, but
Hmm.
probably. And they would just come over. This was still mixed on the Neve. It was long before I moved into the computer. And so they came over every afternoon and we listened to mixes. And then we got to the point where I was going to mix the one that didn't have the lyrics. And like, Ryan, man, you got lyrics? He's like, well, I got an idea. Like, okay, well, but like, do you have lyrics? No, not really. And so this happened a lot with us where we would just work on the song and we wrote the chorus sort of
Hmm.
together while he was singing. But he's such a good singer.
Hmm.
Such a good singer. I mean, the whole band was great. They just really cool. You know, they
Hmm.
just the way they meshed was really amazing. But that's when I first worked with Ryan and was just absolutely blown away by how good he was.
Yeah.
So mix that record, and then that turned into I did a couple of EPs with him, and it would always be this thing of like Ryan would say, "Oh yeah, man, we're going into the studio today." Like, what studio? Where? And I would get in my car. Like there, at one point, he said, "Yeah, we're going to the studio. It's in East Oakland." Like, okay, I'll be there in 5 hours. And I threw some shit in the back of my car and just showed up. Like, all right,
Yeah.
let's do
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
You know, I was not desperate, but like I wanted to work with them as much as I possibly could. I'd go up and
Yeah.
I'd just stay with them. They had a loft, which actually Debbie and I paid the deposit for because otherwise they weren't going to be able to move in.
Wow.
And I don't know, it
Wow.
was like we were there like extra parents or something. Like it just, I don't know. We loved them from the very beginning, the whole band, you know, not
Yeah.
just Ryan. And I would just go sleep on the floor of the loft and we'd work on songs and then we'd go record them somehow. You know, there was never any money for it. And we just did whatever we could do.
Wow.
So that's Audrey Sessions. And that,
Wow.
of course, led to Low Roar. But that's where I
Yeah.
met Rob.
That's, I mean, all right. So, man, that's the intro of the low roar thing,
Yeah.
which I basically want to be part four. So we might
Yeah,
have to
but that's
recap
fine. I
that,
mean,
you
because
know?
Low Roar really is its own thing. I mean, that's where
Yeah.
I met Ryan, and it's
Hmm.
when I was just blown away. Okay, so here's the Low Roar setup, which we'll then talk about in another episode.
Hmm.
So they played at the Troubadour, Audrey Sessions. They had a gig at
Hmm.
the Troubadour. I can't remember. I think it might have been a headline gig, but it might have been opening for someone. It was probably a headline gig. And so they played the gig, and then the Troubadour has a balcony that's upstairs, and it's
Hmm.
sort of like a VIP, blah blah blah. But so I was up there with Ryan after the show, and it was kind of loud. And after the gig, we ended up hanging out like in the parking lot with the band for a really long time. But I still remember while we were up there and they're playing music, it may have been the next band. I don't remember what the fuck it was. It was really loud. And we're talking to each other. And he's like, man, the next thing, I want it to be beautiful and heartbreaking. And that's the record I want to make. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. And that's the only conversation we had about it. And then Low Roar.
Awesome. All right. Very nice. Yeah. All right. So we'll do like a very small recap of that on the next episode
Yeah.
and go into it. Uh, I mean, I feel like that's an important part, the beginning of that you're talking about, like you guys helping to put a deposit on the loft and, you know, you're sleeping on the floor, you're coming back from Weezer sessions and then you're going into sleeping on the floor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was what it was that like these big sessions, I'm hired by Rick or Rob
Hmm.
Cavallo or Don was. So I'm super, super lucky, but I'm in the room because of them. I'm not in the
Hmm.
room because of the band. The band isn't saying, dude, we got to get Andrew to do this. Like
Sure.
those people are producing the record. They go, hey, we got a guy. He's great. He's going to do it. And that's fantastic.
Hmm.
But the Audrey Sessions thing was all me. Like I was in that room because we had a thing with this band. I mean, we recorded an EP in a fucking treehouse studio, which was awesome. But like,
Yeah.
I just whatever they wanted to do, we would just do it, and
Yeah.
it would work out. And so I think it was, I was this sort of very advanced in my career as a mixer and an engineer, and I'd produce some stuff, but nothing big. But there was something different about like that was as amazing as all that stuff was. It was work for hire,
Hmm.
and this was not.
Right.
I was spending money to work on this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Had you done this before with any other artists to this point?
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
a really good friend of mine, Joel Shearer, one of the amazing, amazing guitar players. He was in Alanis's band way back when.
Hmm.
And he decided he wanted to do his own band. And so he started a band called Pedestrian. And it was just a trio. Jason later played bass, and they rehearsed at his place. And so I did the first EP with them. And they tracked a lot at Jason's place, and then we tracked some at my place, and we mixed it. And so that was definitely like that. And that EP is fucking great. I mean, we spent a lot of time in the rehearsal room, and I'm not going to take credit for the music at all, but there were some ideas that I think, okay, so people should go listen to this. Is it even on? Let me hold on. I need to look and see if it's even on music services, because sometimes this thing isn't, which drives me nuts.
I can check for it if you want.
Yeah, I'm going to look at Apple Music. You can look at some other evil empire.
Name of the record?
It's just called the Electric EP and the Acoustic EP. So this is a different band called Pedestrian. Artists.
This is good TV right here.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're both just on our computers.
Us on our computers, hanging out.
All right. I don't see it.
I don't see it. Yeah.
God damn it. It's really good. It's really good. It's one of the, I can still listen to it. It sometimes, like, oh, that was really good. But I think it's that when you get the music aesthetic right, it doesn't matter what it sounds like. It's like the old Stones records that really don't sound great, but are just amazing. So we did that. But like some of the, and this is and what I did, but it's like, it's sort of, I'd wanted to produce, and like Audrey Sessions and Pedestrian was when I could actually sort of have ideas and they would be listened to as opposed to being filtered through other people. And, not everything I suggested worked at all, but like there are three things on that EP that I can remember right off the top of my head. There's a song called Red Tape, which was played. It's a very sort of, it's a very like tight groove with like really tight drums. And it was like, well, okay, so this is cool. We don't need drum fills, but something needs to happen. So what if there were 4 extra drum kits that come in twice, once in this part of the verse and then once in rhythmically a totally different place in the verse. And for one beat, they just go fucking nuts. So it is this blast of basically white noise made by lots of extra drum kits for one beat in between the vocals twice. And it was awesome. And then another one was they're playing a song and there are these big gaps in the vocal. And you're sort of waiting 2 bars for the chord progression to come around. And it's like, well, why are we waiting? Just chop out the 8th bar, man, and let's get back to the vocal. And it immediately, you have a 7-bar phrase in the verse. So not only do you keep going with the vocal and it's got all this momentum, but it's like so different that it's memorable, but without like making you fall over, kind of thing. And then there was another one. One of the cool things about the EP is it really goes from one song to another. So there are 2 like interludes that happen. And one of them is this Joel, and he still does this. He gets these amazing sort of ambient buildups of guitar stuff with delays on his pedal. And like, well, okay, but if we do that, you're a half step high for the next song. And I think it's going into red tape, maybe. So we get the whole ambient thing going and then turn the delays slower. So the whole fucking thing goes down a half step and then boom. As soon
Hmm.
as it hits the half step down, you're into the song. And it's just stuff
Nice.
like that where I feel like, and we do it on the low row records all the time, where
Hmm.
you make the record, you're not just working on the songs and then figuring out what order they go into, you know.
Right.
And there's other stuff like
Right.
on that pedestrian record,
Mm.
on the song where we chop the bar out. um it starts and it's just guitar and vocal, and so we spent most of a day tracking guitar for this thing, the main guitar that's going to be the thing. We came in the next day, hit play because we thought, well, we'll do the vocal, and like, that sounds not right, so we spent all that day redoing it, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just fucking awesome to be able to do
Wow.
that.
Yeah. I love what you just said. You make the record. You're not just making the songs that go on the record. That's great.
Yeah, and you can't always
Yeah.
do it. I mean, obviously the
Yeah.
artist has to be that kind of artist, and musically that needs to be a thing, but
Hmm.
I love when you're doing that. And sometimes it
Hmm.
just comes together when you do get the order together. Like the
Mm.
second low row record, the order of that record is fucking brilliant. Like, it works and it makes each
Yeah.
song even more special. Nobody listens to stuff like that anymore, but anyway, not to get off on too
Yeah.
much of a tangent,
Sometimes
but
we still get to make it like that, though.
we
Yeah.
got to find that EP. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
It's got to exist out in the world, because then Joel made a bunch of records as Pedestrian, and those are definitely on the services. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
Um, yeah. People are asking for us to play it live. So unfortunately, we can't because we will get struck down by YouTube
Yeah. Well, on
with all
Apple
of their
Music, they've
injury.
only got one of the albums and one EP, and neither of those is it. So maybe
Mm.
Spotify. Search for a song called Dosify, Dosify. And that one, holy shit, the intro to that, I forgot about that. Oh my God. It is just this groove.
Dosify. There's an artist named. Oh, here we go. Pedestrian Dosify.
Is it there?
Yeah, it's here.
Share your screen for a sec so I can.
Okay, hold on. Hold on.
It has to be it. But that should mean the whole EP is on there.
All right, hold on. Let me just share the screen. Boom. Here's the whole thing. Oh, that's the stats. There we go.
You're good at this, Mark.
I am good at this. Yeah. Let me know if you need an assistant.
Yeah, so now I'm just seeing all music. I'm not still not seeing it.
Oh, you're still not seeing it. You're not seeing Spotify. Hold on.
That's because Spotify's evil. What? Did I say that out loud? I didn't say that.
Hold on a minute.
I just want to make sure they have the whole EP.
All right, hold on. I can specifically share Spotify. There we go. All
There
right,
you go.
let's find it here. So here's Dosify, Pedestrian. Let me go to this
Oh, I feel
song.
like that's on the. Did he? Maybe he did another version on that record. That's not the. That's not the one.
Ghostly Life.
Yeah, that's the first full length record. Um,
Right. And then
so
here's
I can't
the
remember if that's
discography.
the. No, that's not him. Keep going. So that's him. Sidegeist. We keep going. Ghostly Life. Yeah,
That's
that's
it.
him. And that's it. God damn it. I'll talk to Joel, because it should definitely be out there. I've just talked about it for so long, and now you can't hear it. So good luck with that.
YouTube, maybe?
Yeah, we need to do this live. You know,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah. It's
this is
important.
what the kids want when they're watching. And you know what's going to be amazing when this is a podcast.
Exactly. Yeah. It'd be great. Right with the Greg Wells showing the Instagram thing.
Yeah.
I think we're going to have to
Uh,
edit now. Nice. Okay.
it's only the version from. Oh, and Overwhelmed is on there. Hold on a second. No, he did new versions of a couple of these songs. So anyway, whatever.
Right.
That EP doesn't seem to exist anymore, which is a real shame. Um, oh well. Anyway, moving on.
Moving on. Let's see. We have so much more to talk about.
I'm too chatty.
No, you just worked on too many records. uh, and all of them are uh, there's stuff to talk about in all of them. Just
And of
really cool
course, it
stuff.
seems like all the ones that nobody's actually heard of are the ones that I go on and on and on about.
Well, there's something interesting about that, though. I mean, like what you said about those were the records that you could speak up on because you were the producer in that case instead of having your opinions filtered through other people and stuff. I mean, that's um, the story of the records that you were working on and you're rolling those records. It's interesting that you wanted to go find these other projects and sometimes at your own expense to go and do and fund to, fulfill the art. I don't know what was your
Yeah, because look,
motivation, you know?
I was so lucky to be making a good living working on these other records. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no question, just luckiest boy in the world.
Yeah.
Not Pee Wee Herman. It was me who was luckiest boy in the world.
Yes.
Um, let's just have a half second of silence for Paul Rubens, though. Okay. Um, so I could afford to go do that, and I had gear I could throw in the back of the car. So, really, really lucky to be able to do it. But yeah, I mean, it was those projects, not only because like musically I loved them, but there was also, even though I had a bigger role, it was slightly less pressure and it just
Hmm.
felt creative and, yeah, just a bit freeing in a way. Not that
Yeah.
there's anything wrong with working on those other records I was working on, but
Right.
there's a
Right.
lot of pressure on those,
Hmm.
and for good reason. I'm not saying there shouldn't be, but
Yeah.
yeah, I could put the pressure on myself on these to try and make them as great as I could make them, but
Yeah.
it was different. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah. Very cool. Okay. So where that tangent was going.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had another question about that, and I can tell my brain's starting to go.
Dude, we're only
But
3 hours in. Such a
no,
pussy.
no, no, no. I,
Believe me, it's past my bedtime. When we were doing these, I didn't go to bed before 2 a.m. Now, 10 o'clock, man.
right. Okay. Yeah, just I don't know. I feel like there's more that I wanted to say about that side of it. And just choosing to do those projects. I remember my question. Was this in between other projects that you would work on these things, or would you? They were in your schedule. You were working on that record during that time.
No, I mean, it was just when I could,
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't
Yeah.
going to quit a project to go up and do the Audrey session stuff. It just like the schedule
Yeah.
worked out for that.
Right.
Um, but yeah, I mean, you work when you got work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
I had a Neve console to pay off, and then I had two kids who were going to college.
Yeah.
So, you
Exactly.
know,
Right. Yeah. But you still wanted to go do those things, and there's just something awesome there. I mean, it speaks to your
yeah, I mean,
passion
look,
and all of that.
I think a lot of us do this in part because it's the way we can be in the band.
Mm-hmm.
We can, and the bigger your role, it sounds selfish and self-serving in a way, but it's like you can not just take credit for it, but you can be 100% justified in the pride you feel about the record. Like if I'm engineering for someone like Rick, and I'm one cog in the project, and I can be
Mm-hmm.
really proud of what I did and all of that, but I can't take credit for the record at all, and I can't take credit for any record. It's always the artist's record, but
Mm-hmm.
Low Roar is the epitome of it. But with projects like that, you're more involved, and I feel like maybe the band appreciates your role in a way that makes you be able to not take credit for it, but to just justified pride, or like, I don't know how to describe it, but there is something more special about those projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As
Awesome.
amazing as it is to work on, the big name stuff we're talking about.
Yeah, it doesn't make one thing worse than the other. It's just,
No, but
you know.
hold on. I forgot one thing about the U2 session, though.
Oh, please.
So at one point, Paul McCartney came in to say hi, and then he slid down the banister like he did back in the 60s. That was cool. Okay, so
That's
moving
amazing.
on.
Moving
Yeah,
on. That's awesome that just randomly popped into your head there.
yeah.
Amazing. Okay, the chat is requesting a Q&A, so we have to make some
All
decisions
right. So
here.
yeah, let's
Tough
do a
decisions.
Q&A, and we're going to start with Low Roar next time, right? Because we did Audrey sessions, so we can start and then we can just jump back.
You want to do that and then go backwards after?
Yeah.
Or do you want to finish on the low roar? We'll talk about it after.
Yeah. I mean, whatever. But we should get to it next time, definitely.
Okay. All right. Maybe we should just do that. Let's just yeah. So our breakoff point
Because
is
it's
Audrey
not. I mean,
Sessions.
we're not gonna talk about Low Roar for 2.5 hours. I mean, it's a chunk, and I do feel like we don't want to break it up with other records. We should just talk
Mhm.
about Low Roar because
Yeah.
it's an important thing. It's why I have a label. It's the reason for a lot of stuff in my life. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll
Yeah.
talk about that in a chunk. But
Awesome.
it doesn't matter when we start. Believe me, I'll talk about Low Roar all day, every day.
Yeah. Okay. So everybody, we'll do low roar at the beginning of the next one,
Unless
and
we do.
let's go listen to low roar records before then. It'll make the conversation more fun.
Yeah,
Everybody. So yeah. All right. Do you want to do some Q&A?
let's do some Q&A.
All right. Um, when are you going to come clean about the headphones?
I just said
Okay.
there's nothing
Uh,
to come clean about. Like, there are plenty of headphones I think sound amazing. It's just, can I work in them? And I think most people must have had this where you hear speakers that sound incredible, but it's like, well, that's just for listening to stuff. That's not for working. And the
yeah.
Sonys for me are for working. And it'd be cool to have another one because Sonys do have some issues. There's a big dip at around 400 hertz, which means, I have to work hard in that area instead of just it being something. I actually have to pay attention like actively. So I'm not looking to get away from the Sonys because of anything other than if I could find something else I could actually work in. These Shures are great, but I can't work in them. It's perfect for programming and stuff, but I can't mix in them. It just doesn't. There's some things you listen to and you immediately go to the mode of, oh, I want to work on that. I want to change that. I want to do that. And
Hmm.
everything else is just for listening to music.
Right.
That's all. There's nothing to come clean about, fellas, ladies.
It wasn't a real question.
Okay.
Okay. Billy Kidman 87 says, what are your top 3 favorite drum sounds on records? Chat, make sure you get your questions in too. Go ahead.
Oh, man. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know. Like, there's a record we talked about in one of the interviews, and it's the something skulls, and the names are not coming to my head, but it's like it's been sampled so many times. You're like, oh my god, that's the original. You hear
Hmm.
samples of old school, cool sounding drums, and yes, somebody recorded those,
Right.
and it's like fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna say weird stuff because I feel like it, and these are definitely not my favorite drum sounds ever, but just cool stuff. Uh, Memphis Soul Stew, when those drums come in, it's
Mm.
like it's the coolest drum fill ever, and the groove is insane. So that um, I didn't just fall asleep. I'm just trying to think. I mean, there should be a million records. Okay, here's another one, and no one's ever going to hear it. And this is one I actually recorded. The drum sound on the intro to Dosify is one of the coolest
Mm.
fucking things ever, and it's a 3 mic drum sound, and it is
Keep talking about
awesome.
this thing we can't listen to.
I'll talk to Joel, and I'll just rip the fucking CD and put it on the internet or something.
If they'll let us play it on the air, we could do that. next time or something. So
Yeah, I'll ask Joel because it's so good. You know,
yeah.
it's just so good.
Hastings says he wants to say Levy. I can feel it.
Well, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
obvious. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so how do you feel about the Yamaha NS10s compared to the MDR 7506's EQ curve?
To be honest, I don't know that they have a lot to do with each other. NS10s are not bright. The Sonys are bright.
Mm-hmm.
The NS10s have a huge push in the mid range where you go from the woofer to the tweeter, and I don't like them.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I had them. They're in that picture, and I had them for a while, partially because the tannoys that I used to use all the time have to be reconed every couple of years, and I didn't really know that early on. So I just kind of stopped liking them, and I thought, well, maybe I'm over it. And it just turned out they needed to be reconed. But I got a pair of NS10s because bands would always want to listen on those to
Mm-hmm.
begin with, but I never liked them. And I would have
Yeah.
huge low mid problems on some mixes. Some mixes sounded great when I took them somewhere else, and some mixes sounded terrible. And
Hmm.
I never figured them out. But I don't know that they really have anything to do with the Sonys.
Yeah. You just said they have a mid range push when you go from the woofer to the tweeter. So,
Yeah, like that's where the buildup is. I mean, it's
mm,
probably a little higher than that, but like a lot of speakers, that's where they're weird, and that's why they
mm,
have a weird
in the
spot in the mid
crossover.
range. Because it's in the crossover where you're getting the same
Mm-hmm.
frequencies out of two speakers, and that's why the tannoys are so good because they're concentric. The tweeter is right in the middle of the woofer, so they're
Yeah.
perfectly time aligned.
Right.
Most speakers are not.
Right. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was just explained well. I mean, I don't think like there's a lot of talk about, crossover interference and speaker design out there.
Yeah, I mean, look, and there's so many speakers that sound great, so it's obviously easy, not easy, but you can overcome it, no problem. But
Hmm.
that is a thing that needs to be overcome.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Marco G on Who's Yours, Take It to Church. Take Me to Church. Hosier.
Yep.
I believe you said you used two de-essers. What order in the chain did you use them? Both one after the
Um,
other?
Wow. I don't remember on that song. Probably that would have been on Movement, which I did a couple videos. Did one stereo and one Atmos video. When I use two de-essers, it's because if you use one, you have to step on it so hard you create a lisp, and that's not what most singers want. So generally, I will put one as the very first thing on the track because that's when it's the most dynamic. So the S's are sticking out the most, so you can grab a lot of them there. And then I put one last because at that
Hmm.
point you've crushed it, you've added harmonic distortion, you've done whatever you've done. So now you've brought out the S's that are left, and so you tame them a bit more. So first and last.
Cool.
And that's
Hastings
on
asks,
like that's on tons of records. That's not just on his voice.
yeah. Uh, Hastings asks, do you not hand fix S's? Do you only use the
Sometimes I
2D-esser
do.
trick? Hmm.
Sometimes I do. There was a record that I mixed. Yeah, it's something else we're going to have to talk about. But there's a classical record I mixed, and the vocalists on it, there were lots of S's, and like there was no way you could cut vinyl with it. Like it was too much, and it had to be done by hand. And I actually hired someone to do some of it because there were just so many of them, and it took days. It took days because it had to be done manually, and the voices are so exposed over an orchestra that it's not like there's cymbals and guitars in that area.
Hmm.
So every single one of them had to be done and checked and crossfaded, and I just couldn't do them all.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. Okay. Neglected Child says, do we need another pandemic to get new Andrew Talks to Awesome People?
I'm not wishing for another pandemic. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've talked about it a bunch, making a list. And I think the problem for me is that I would research for about 4 days
Hmm.
for every one of those. So that was more than half my week. I would watch and read every single interview I could find and then just do research and stuff. And I don't know that I've got the energy for that at the moment. It's so much work. And of course, during the pandemic, I was learning how to program SoundFlow, but work kind of stopped for the first few months because nobody knew how to record themselves yet. And so I had time to do it. And it's, I don't know. I mean, we had a big list going of people we wanted to have on. We still need to do part 3 with Eric Valentine, talking about all the gear. We never even got to that. And now he's built a whole fucking studio.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there's so many people, that I would love to do. Just it's nothing to do with me. It's just a document. I mean, I'm just really lucky to be able to talk to him. But like the fact that we got a couple of hours with Al Schmidt, with him being like super informal and, I think that's great, but I don't know the answer to whether or not that'll happen. I really don't know. I would love it to happen, but I can't. Mark knows this about me. I can't half-ass anything. So if I'm going to do it, it'll take me 4 days per person to prepare.
Yeah. Right. Maybe less often would be the answer.
Yeah, but I have to prepare right before it. Otherwise, because that's the whole thing. Like I need to be carrying it all in my head. I can't take notes.
Yeah.
I have to. It's like when I'm producing. When a band is playing takes, when we finish, and you saw this in the start to finish thing, and there were a lot of takes.
Yeah.
As soon as I knew we had it, I did the comp with no notes and not listening to anything, and that was 90% of the comp of the takes. 10 minutes later, I have no fucking idea what we used and what. But I carry it all in my head, and that's the way those interviews were. Because otherwise, they wouldn't have been good. I would have been looking at my notes, and as soon as you do that, you're not listening as well. And it's like with you too. Like you'll go to look at like what's next, but you're actually listening to what I say. There is nothing worse than an interview where someone asks a question, you get the answer, then they're looking at their notes and go, "Okay, great." So, and then they say the next question. Like that's
right.
No, you don't do that at all. It's got to be a conversation, and the only way to do that is to know everything about what you want to talk about.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, it's super hard. Speaking from experience. Yeah, right now. Okay. Have you ever used a sample of natural reverb and blended it with the plug-in reverb to create a unique sound from Super Eventide?
You mean like an impulse response versus an algorithmic one?
A sample of a natural reverb and blended it. I don't know. Maybe like reamping, like if you reamped a room and then blended that with a reverb or something.
No,
I don't know how else you would use a natural reverb.
Yeah, I don't really have a room to reamp. I do have a well that probably has an 8-second reverb time, and at some point I need to drop a microphone and a speaker down that thing.
Oh my gosh!
Near the studio, it's insane. This well, it's 125 feet before you hit the water, and it's perfectly round, and it's all brick, and there is no mortar. It's all dry fit brick.
Yeah,
it's absolutely insane. But I mean, I blend reverbs all the time because they always sound bad to me with just one, and that's an Al Schmidt thing. That's where I learned that, is that even though he's using a chamber and beautiful reverbs, Bricastes, one of them on its own just has so much character that it just sounds like reverb. But if you blend two and turn them down, all of a sudden you just have some space. And it almost doesn't matter what they are. I mean, a plate in a chamber, that works. A hall in a room, that works. Like, there's something about it just being even more random and chaotic that makes it work better for me.
Awesome. The year is 2025, and the Andrew Scheps Wellverb plugin has just come out.
Never going to happen. No. But I could do...
We sampled meticulously Andrew Scheps well.
Yeah. We hung a drummer down there.
That's right. Yeah. With an 8-second reverb time, you can change the makeup of the bricks.
I don't know if it's 8 seconds, but it's pretty long.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So got your...
When I'm doing frequency sweeps down that thing.
Anyway. Great. They'll think something fell in there. I know you said you keep your mobile rig, I know you said to keep mobile, you were in the box.
Yeah.
When are you going to show us the console behind the wall? Just kidding. What kind of spec laptop do you have? And do you just go out a headphone out on the laptop, or do you bring an interface to get a better headphone preamp?
Well, at the moment, my main rig is the Mac Studio. So it's very small, and I have a very cool bag for it, but it's not a laptop. But I had been holding on to old laptops for as long as I could, and I got one of the M2 Max laptops, and I was setting it up just to have Pro Tools on it, and holy shit.
Hmm.
Like, it's amazing. So I was just going to bring that for Mix with the Masters, but then I realized I actually need my laptop for stuff.
Hmm.
So I'm going to wait till whatever the next generation of laptops is, and then I will probably move the studio over to that, because
Wow.
like, it's so fast.
Yeah.
It's insane. It
Yeah.
really is crazy. So that would be what it is. At the moment, I still need to carry UAD hardware. And so when I'm traveling, usually I use the Twin as a headphone amp, because for years that's what I used anyway.
Hmm.
So I'm really used to the way my Sony sound coming out of that. So I usually use that. The, I mean, the headphone output on the laptop probably sounds good, but I wouldn't, you know, no. I'd use something with a little more power, and, you know.
Hmm. Cool. All right. Do you have any Analog Solutions modular modules? Tom lives a few miles
Yes.
from us. This is from Super Eventide.
Yeah, I do. I have the sampler delay, which is one of my favorite delays.
Hmm.
I've got their Echo and their comb filter. I don't have a whole lot more. Their stuff's it's it's expensive. It's amazing, but when you're like, I have this much to spend on a module, it's tough. But
Yeah.
yeah, their stuff is so good. It's really really good. I mean, that delay is absolutely one of the most fun. And when you're very speeding it, you're changing it. It just sounds spongy. It doesn't sound
Hmm.
like, okay, I'm changing the time on the delay.
Hmm.
It's really good.
Awesome. Did you ever use any of those as outboard effects? Would you ever use that as a delay
Yeah.
on an insert?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. I don't do it that much anymore, because I mean, there's so many more like really cool plugins like Audio Thing and companies like
Hmm.
that. It used to be that plugins were not as crazy.
Yeah.
So I used it all the time. There's a song, I wish I remembered what it was. It might be an International Noise Conspiracy song, where I did manual phasing,
Hmm.
because like, you don't just put an LFO on it. You literally tweak the knobs and then open them up fast. And I
Yeah.
did that because there is a song on one of my favorite records ever, which is, God damn it, my brain is just uh the song, I believe it's on Jason and the Argonauts.
I'll
Um
pull up the
am
record
I
and
gonna
then I'll.
anyway, but where the bridge does that. And like, these things are just clamping down and clamping down and clamping down, and then for the last two beats of the section they open up, and it is so cool that I did that on a record. And that delay, no, 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 that's not
Oh,
it.
that's not it at all.
No,
Oh, man.
it's an XTC record.
For
Green cover. Yeah,
XTC.
yeah, yeah.
Got it. Oh, that's the name of the song. I thought that was the name of a record and you were trying to name.
No, 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 no.
On
The song is
part
Jason and the
four, there will be
Argonauts.
a different host, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's an XTC record. But anyway,
Yeah.
and then if you listen to "In Love Dying," which is one of the "I'm Beside You" releases, and there's a little story about that, which I'll tell you right now. That it's really long, and so Josh and I ran the drums through that delay and just printed tracks of it. And during the mix, I didn't even automate it. I'm just like, I wanted to treat it like a dub reggae mix, where I had these extra delays to fuck with the drums. And anytime I felt like I wanted to do something, I would just bring those up and do weird rides on them. So it's "In
Hmm.
Love Dying." And what's cool about that is all of those songs came out on 7-inch vinyl. And so there are 17 songs, because there are 9 vinyls, but that one is on side A and side B.
Mm-hmm.
So it just fades out at the end of side A, then you flip the thing and it goes to side B. But 7-inch vinyl sounds very different on the inside of the record than the outside of the record. You lose top end as you go in because the angular velocity, blah, blah, blah. So we did all of the vinyl tricks on those releases. So that one, we cut side B inside out. So you play side A and the needle goes from the outside to the inside. Then you flip the record, and we actually had to rewire the lathe. We had to flip the wires on the motor for the lathe and then disable all of the safety shit, which normally picks up the cutter head. When you get there, drop the cutter, and the thing's spinning the other way, so the screw is going out, and then the lock groove is all the way on the outside.
Wow.
Awesome. So if you like flip it over and just drop the needle on the outside, it just stays there. Like there's
Yeah,
nothing
that's
going on.
amazing. Wow.
So you got to drop it, and it plays inside out, which is
Oh,
awesome.
that's super cool. Nice. Okay. There is a question in the chat. They are wondering if you've ever talked about the modular synth in a video, and the answer is yes.
Yes.
There it is.
Yes. I mean, it was really early on, and it's just little bits and pieces, but there's one thing where we used a sequencer as an oscillator because it just spits out different amounts of DC. So you run it at audio rate, and then you can change the waveform just by changing the sequencer steps. And, and there's plenty I don't know about it. I still get the manuals out on a lot of these modules because I don't use it enough to just be fluent, and it's too big. Like if I had 12 modules, I would know it's like getting ready for interviews.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't keep it all in my head, and there's so many people who are better at it than me, but it's a huge part of every single low roar record. Like I'm almost ready emotionally to work on the 6th low roar record. So I start making stacks of instruments. So I've got stuff I'm definitely going to use on the modular, which I haven't used before. I've got the harmonium out. I've got the bass out. I've got all my electro harmonics pedals. I've already decided that's like a thing for this record. And I got my trumpets fixed. So I got stuff. So did you just like have to go to bed or something?
No, I just wanted to put the modular up for you. And then
all right. And you can see the top, like that's the big muff.
Yeah.
The top of the stack.
Nice.
So,
it is the same modular that's in that video though, right? It's just a different case.
Yeah. It's just, this is the only custom piece of studio furniture I've ever owned.
Yeah.
Ever. So.
Even with the consoles. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the consoles are the furniture. So.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Let's see if we got any other good questions here. There is a stellar question, actually. Okay, this is from Gonix G. He says, if you knew that tomorrow morning you were going to wake up and all of your mixing superpowers and all of your memories regarding audio and mixing were going to be gone, what notes would you leave yourself on your drawer to try and optimize your learning in the next year? What would be the 3 things to focus on obsessively to make the most progress?
You mean like I'd forget everything about it, but I'd still want to do it?
Like you would leave a note being like, don't do it. Yeah, go do something else.
Don't fucking do it.
I knew you were going to say that.
I mean, the first thing is to listen to a lot of records. Like you can't do anything better than that. Just listen and listen and listen. Because it's, you got to learn the tools to get there, but you've got to have something in your head that you're going for. Who cares what the kick drum sounds like? You need to hear songs work and then figure out, well, wait, why do I love this recording? And it could be something super specific, or it could just be a vibe, or you could realize like, oh, wow, this has nothing to do with the sonics. This one is just about the song. Stuff like that. So listening is absolutely the first and best thing. And, people say, well, whatever, that's not what I'm asking about. Like, how do you learn about compression stuff? You do need to do that to get there. But if you don't hear something in your head, there's no point in working on the mix. Because you're not working on the mix. You're just working on some element within the mix.
Right.
So that's numbers 1, 2, and 3. Well, I mean, and then Two is, I mean, it's something I say all the time, especially when I'm talking at schools and things, which is that the only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers.
Yeah.
And this is because you're not mixing for yourself. You're mixing for everybody else in the world who's going to hear it
Mm-hmm.
through the lens of what the artist wants.
Right.
It's your mix, but it's nothing to do with you. And you could answer every single question you have ever been asked about anything to do with making records with the only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers. Like,
Yeah.
that is the answer to every single question.
The end. Yeah.
So those two things are not specific to gear at all. And then I guess the third thing would be, like I was saying about the modular, start with a ridiculously limited tool set and learn the fuck out of every aspect of it and refuse to use anything else and make some records.
Yeah.
You don't need a million things. Like there's nothing worse than digging through a plugin folder looking for the thing that's going to be perfect. You've seen me work. Omnichannel is 95% easily of the plugins that I instantiate while I'm mixing. My template's got stuff, but whatever. 95% of the time, it's an omnichannel. And then of the other 5%, probably 3% of that, it's Sansan.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I might go digging.
Right.
But that's it. You know,
And once you have the Wells plugin, you won't need to dig at all.
Well, exactly.
Yeah.
But I've got, got you. Believe me, I got you. It just wasn't funny enough to laugh.
Somebody in the chat said that it's revenge for Greg Wells. You can make it the Wells plugin.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I was going to make a really good point, and now I've forgotten, though. What was I saying?
That basically 95% is omnichannel. And
yeah. I mean, and I own thousands of plugins at this point because, I mean, it's literally like 2,000 plugins because people send me stuff. I buy plugins. They send me other, when I start a record, I need to hear it the way they were hearing it. So, and I use almost none of them most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. Other people use them, and it's not like I get rid of them and replace them with omnichannel. I want to hear why they did what they did. And every once in a while, it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's a really cool thing that they're doing, or this plugin sounds great, or whatever. But usually, it's like, wow, that's all really amazing. I'm going to put an omnichannel on it. I'm going to add some harmonic distortion. I'm going to find the mid-range frequency I want to hear more of, and I'm going to turn that up.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
Right.
So, yeah, those are the things. Listen. Only care about what comes out of the speakers and have a very small tool set that you really, really, really know. Chad can make a record with 2 plugins. No question. He can mix an entire record. Well, maybe 3. He'd want an EQ, a dynamics processor, and Sansan.
Yeah. Crazy.
It's what you hear in your head. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Very unhelpful.
Luckily, you don't have to write a note because this was all recorded to YouTube. So just make sure you leave a link somewhere for yourself for the morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Or a note saying, don't watch
stuff and think, wow.
Yeah. There you go.
That's a lot to forget.
Like, hey, I did some cool stuff. Wish I could remember it. Great question, Gonks. I think that is going to do it for us for today.
Fair enough. It is, in fact, my bedtime. Well, it's an hour.
I apologize. There is one more from Christy.
Okay.
What's the most successful song or artist where you've had to use drum replacements such as Trigger 2?
I don't know. I mean, I use stuff like that all the time as reinforcement and whatever. Like it has nothing to do with anything other than I hear what I want the drum to be like, but I never ever replace. I don't think I've ever fully replaced a drum ever. I'm always reinforcing. And it's just like, well, I could spend a really long time with compressors and EQ, or I can pull this thing up and blend it in, and there you go. Because the only thing that matters is what comes out of the speakers. It's like singers that I can only do a full take. No one will know your vocal's going to come out of the speakers. No one will know. I hate vocal tuning. Okay, well, now we can't use this thing that's an absolutely amazing performance, but you dipped flat enough that it's like, it's pulling everybody's ear and it's distracting. Like, you use whatever tools you've got to make the record fucking awesome. And you don't step all over it. I mean, you respect what you've got, but you just use what you use. And everybody hears differently. Some people really hear stuff tuned a lot. I only tune what bothers me. Drums, it's just like, I really want the kick to feel like this. And it's just whatever. What's the fastest way to be creative and not hate yourself? Like,
Like, that sounds pretty good. Let's do that.
yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I completely understand the question, but I feel like it's a dangerous way to think, to wonder like who's the most successful artist to use it on. Like, I've used stuff like that on every single thing I've ever mixed that needed stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember, you know, I
Yeah.
don't remember like what I've done. But also I've done stuff where like there's snare hits that are fucked and I'll fly one. You know,
Yeah.
you've just messed with the drummer's performance. Okay, so you want to have something distracting in the middle of the mix, or do you want everybody to just love the song? I vote for the
Right.
song. So I'm not precious about that, but at the same time, you do worry about stuff. Like I just mixed some Smashing Pumpkins stuff, and there was one song where at the end it goes into this awesome, like super open groove, and it's got a lot of palm mutes in it that are happening. It's gong gong gong, and those gong gong dongs are palm mutes and bass and the drums. And I'm mixing, and it's like, Billy is a fucking good guitar player, and everything is on purpose, like everything. And I just felt like those palm mutes are sharp, and this doesn't feel as heavy. And I was freaking out about the fact that I was going to tune the palm mutes. But as soon as I did it, it's like the whole track just dropped an octave, and it was like
Wow.
fucking awesome. And,
Nice.
it's not like, I mean, who cares? It's
Yeah.
what he was doing anyway. It's just when you mute, the strings bend,
Yeah.
and you've got to put pressure on the strings with both hands. So, of course, it's going to go a little bit sharp.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
All that matters is what comes out of the speakers.
yeah, and the intention is absolutely there. It's not like I created something out of thin air. It's like it's exactly what it wanted to be, but rather than EQing or doing something to get that low end in, it was never going to happen because you've got something that's slightly out of tune with something else, so that the harmonics don't line up anymore. And
Mm-hmm.
once they lined up, man, it was just huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Awesome. You have one other piece of advice that you've been known to say across the internet, and I actually have a clip to prove
Oh,
that.
no.
I have a clip to play of that. So here's your advice to people.
Let's talk a little bit about advice. First of all, advice to the up and coming crowd who really wants to get into this world. And second, advice to guys like me who are already in it, have experience, but really want to excel and take it up a notch.
Other than don't be a dick, it's hard to be specific about it.
No, I think that don't be a dick is overall good advice in everything.
Yes, that's going to be my new Twitter hashtag. With I actually use Twitter.
Hashtag don't be a dick.
Okay. So yeah, that's
First
from
of all,
the
let's thank Matt Boudreau from Working Class Audio.
yeah.
Did that.
Yeah.
That is actually very high up on the list. I mean, that's not it's not a mixing thing. This is more as an engineer. Like, the most important thing, and I talked about coming in and reading the room and understanding the people. If you're going to track a record, especially with a band and a producer, you have to be a good hang.
Mm-hmm.
If people don't want you in the room, you better be ridiculously talented. Because otherwise, why would you be in the room? You're
Right.
not the musician. You're not the producer. Who the fuck needs an engineer who's a pain in the ass?
Right. Right.
So, yeah,
Very
don't be a
true.
dick.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, Andrew has some amazing interviews on Working Class Audio. Matt is an amazing Amazing interviewer. He's got 2
And
interviews, I believe.
he has a very different take. Like his interviews are
Yeah,
all for people who are like he said, like doing it, but not, you know, whatever, like, you know, working
sure.
hard to kind of come up the ranks. And I mean, he's a super talented guy and he works all the time, but
Yeah.
and I love that that's, and he also talks about the business side, like how do you deal with this and the family side. And I mean, that's what he's interested in and he's really good at it.
Yeah. Yeah. So, from that, so we mentioned the Greg Wells stuff earlier, and your key piece of advice is don't be a dick. But I happen to have something else here. Let's see.
Final question. What the hell is going on with you and Greg Wells and all these pictures of you and Fab DuPont he keeps
Oh
posting?
my God. He's so funny. I didn't even realize he was doing this. So at NAMM this year, I did a ton of interviews, but we decided to do them kind of like between two ferns sort of thing,
Right.
but just with
Being a
me
dick.
being a total asshole. So I'm interviewing people and being a dick, like a real dick.
What do you have to say for yourself, Andrew?
What I have to say for myself is that's my alter ego.
That's all right.
And can I just say that when we did them and they were really fun and it was exhausting because I think we recorded all of them in 2 days. And there's some that
Yeah.
haven't even aired because people didn't want them to, or, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
So we did, I think, 14 of them in 2 days or
Mhm.
something like that. And obviously they're way longer than, they were at least half an hour each. So anyway,
Yeah.
and one of them was Chris Mara from Welcome to 1979. And he knew what the deal was, but he didn't tell his wife. And his wife was in the room. And she wanted to fucking kill me. How could you let him talk to you like that? What an asshole. And I felt terrible because he said she was just living. And then she wouldn't really believe him. Like, no. He's a really nice guy. He was just,
Yeah.
you know. So yeah. So if you want
She-
to if you want to joke, you can be a dick.
Yes. Yeah. It's okay in that realm. During that shoot, she like grabbed my arm and she's like, like to me. It's like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like it was really funny.
Because
Yeah.
you know, sometimes it's fun to be a dick when it's in a safe place, you know.
Right. Yeah.
But
Pretty funny.
yeah, those were
So
super
that's the last
fun
piece of
to do.
advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So be a dick, but don't be a dick.
Right. Awesome.
That's
Yeah,
very
definitely
well
check
done,
out Between
Mark.
Two Shares. Thank you.
And
Check out Between Two
definitely
Shares.
watch
on YouTube.
Greg's, because first of all, he's just a funny guy anyway. But it was one of the earlier ones. I think it was like number 2 or 3 that we filmed. And for some reason, Greg decided to down like 3 glasses of wine right before we started. So you can see him getting drunk as it goes on.
Right, as it progresses with the editing and everything. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so good. I still like the one with Angel and Fede, who you didn't know before.
Never
And
met him.
they had together, they were like a production duo, and they had just worked on a record for Coldplay and a record for Kanye. And my brief to Andrew was they just worked on the Coldplay and Kanye records. So the whole interview, he's just acting like this is one record where Coldplay and
It's a
Kanye
collaboration.
collabed. Yeah. No, it's amazing. The guys are
Did
just
that
looking
one
at
come
each other like,
out?
is he serious? I
Did that
thought
one
it
finally come out?
did. I think it did.
I hope so.
I'll have to look. Yeah. It's
And
one
the
of my
ones that
favorite
didn't
ones, though.
come out
So,
are still really good. And we
Yeah.
did one with Guillaume, which is fucking awesome.
yeah.
And we did another one where we got to talk about midget Elvis, which is, you know, it's not very PC. It's not the word you're supposed to use, but it was in a very specific context that is, I mean, it's a thing in Las Vegas for weddings. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, that one didn't happen either. It's a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm a total dick on those. A total dick.
Yeah.
But
It's-
don't do it in
it's
the
impressive.
studio. Only do it
Yeah.
on camera while interviewing your friends.
When you set up a show. Yeah. Very cool. All right. So hang around after for a minute. We'll find a date for the next part.
Yes.
And then
Or do we
we'll
want to
see
do that
everybody
right
on that
now?
one.
Do we want to do that right now on air while we're, or do you need to look at some stuff?
Let's try it. Yeah.
Okay.
Be a part of the planning, everybody.
Okay, you say some dates, and I'll say I can't do that.
Okay. I'm gonna
Yeah, I can't
say.
do that. I can't do that.
I'm gonna say.
I should wait for the date, shouldn't I?
You don't have to. You could just keep the between two friends persona.
Yeah.
All right. October 16th. It's before AES. Could be tight.
I think. Hold on. What the hell is this? Okay, that's that. Oh, I was wondering what the hell was going on because I'm still on Eastern time in my calendar. Yeah, I can't. I can't do that.
Okay, awesome. This is fun. October 23rd.
We
I know
could
you
do the
can't do that.
23rd. That's the day before I fly to New York for
Oh, okay. Let's do that.
or no, we can't. There won't be time. I was thinking like we could
At
actually do
AES.
one at AES, but there won't be time because
Probably
Fab's
not.
got his party. Like, there's all kinds of stuff going on.
Yeah, right. To do it from Flux.
So,
would
do
be
we want to
difficult.
try and do it the 23rd?
Yeah, let's do it. If you don't think you'll be stressed with flying out the next day.
I probably will be. What time's my flight? My flight's not till the afternoon.
It's not like it only takes a half hour to do this. So it's kind of
No,
a
that's
half
true.
day. Yeah. You want to do it when
Well,
you get
what are
back?
you up to next week?
To next week?
Second.
All right. Chat room, we'll have to move Mix Tank. Let me know if you're not cool with that. Let's do next
Well,
week.
let's not firm that up, but let's pretend like we might do that, and then
All right,
we'll
next week.
confirm.
It'll be Mix Tank or Andrew. Yeah. All right. So if I can't do that, I'll let you know, and that would just be
Okay.
on the team side. But awesome.
All right.
It's riveting streaming.
Yeah. It's going to be even more riveting as a podcast.
Dave Westner says he can't do the 23rd. It's got to be a different date.
Oh, okay.
Well, it'll be next week, so we'll be good.
Yeah.
He says the second's better for him. He appreciates it.
Okay. Well, good.
All right.
Good. I think that might
Yeah.
work out then.
Awesome.
Thank God. I mean, you know.
It's perfect. See if we can play that thing for everybody next week on air.
Yeah, I'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what the deal is. The fact that it's not up anywhere, especially not on YouTube, means we should be able to play it. So I can, I can send you some files. I mean, you know, it's not the shortest thing in the world, but it's good. It's really
Awesome.
good.
Yeah. We should
All
probably
right. Well,
listen.
we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what we
Awesome.
can do.
Guys, thank you so much in the chat for hanging out with us for this whole time and
Thank you.
while we browse the internet on the air and everything.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's
Cool.
what the kids do these days. You know,
Yeah.
they browse it at dinner. You might as well browse it while streaming.
While streaming. Yeah. Awesome. All
All
right.
right.
We'll see
Thanks,
everybody next time. Thanks, Andrew. See ya.
Bye.